Hello and welcome. I'm the Rambling Director. Sorry it's a little bit echoey in here due to some technical difficulties. I have to film this on my iPad. So I'll explain that more in another video. But for now, we got to get right to it because today is a very special day. As you might know, if you keep up with cartoons and toys, as I do, I love cartoons. If you keep up with that sort of thing, you may know that Hasbro has been celebrating the 40th year anniversary of My Little Pony the last little bit. They released, I think last year it was, they released their 40th anniversary line, which we released all of the classic 80s pony toys that a lot of us grew up with. And today in particular is a special day because today is the 13th year anniversary of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, which just so happens to be my favorite animated show. So we're going to do this just like all of my other videos where I talk about shows that I'm watching, but in this case I have more hindsight, so I can give you some more details on the specifics. Today we're going to be talking about episode 1 of Friendship is Magic. Now this was, as with any pilot, this was the handshake episode. This was the hi, nice to meet you, put your best foot forward. And I think it did that very well. I remember the first time watching this was probably back in 2012, I think was the first time I watched any of the series. And I started it in order after watching a couple episodes because I was really interested in it after watching it with my little siblings. Had no idea that people on the internet were, that at the time it was a big thing and that it was a weird thing for adults to be liking My Little Pony. So it was kind of a weird experience to discover that because I didn't discover it till later. I just watched it with my siblings and I love cartoons. I've talked about that a lot on this channel. I grew up with Powerpuff Girls, Ed, Edd n Eddy, Johnny Bravo, the classic cartoons. And I had Boomerang, so I grew up with the stuff my mom grew up with. And I've just always had this great respect for animation of all sorts, but particularly just TV cartoons. I loved the TV shows in the 80s. And the reruns of My Little Pony that I would watch. I loved that too. So yeah, so watching this show, it kind of took me back because some of you might not remember this, but in 2012, 2010, we were coming off a string of like 7 to 10 years where cartoons were not that great. They really were kind of crappy. And, the one that comes to my mind immediately was Johnny Test. I had a particular loathing for the Johnny Test. Which is, if like Johnny Test was like your favorite cartoon, no shame or anything like that. It did not connect with me. I did not like that show. And so, yeah, I went back and watched this show the first time and it always struck me, in particular, one element of this show is that it sets up by having that classic, fairy tale opening, the book, reading the story. It sets up a lot of lore. It really establishes Equestria as its own world in the same way that in the first few chapters of Sorcerer's Stone, you get that sort of, setup where like, it doesn't tell you everything about the world, but it gives you enough that you get a taste for it and you want to know more. I really always greatly appreciated that. I thought the way they set up this story, the magic system is a soft magic system, but they set it up very nicely by showing what magic can do. That the two princesses raise the sun and the moon, that's an interesting bit of world building. It's something I've never seen in anything else, to the best of my knowledge, where, the powers of the universe and stuff are always kind of tied into these magic systems, but to have a heliocentric model where the sun and moon get raised by unicorns, that's fairly unique. And so from the first time I watched this first episode, I just remember thinking like, wow, man, like they really put some thought into building a world that from the word go just is immediately enthralling. And that really, like later, jumping way ahead here, but later on when Hasbro introduced things like the Equestria Girls, which is a movie series where the ponies go into the human world and they become humans, there was always something missing. There was no pun intended. There was some magic missing from it, and there was a lot of debate among people online who were fans, about why this wasn't so good. And a YouTuber named Silverquill, who I'm a big fan of, actually is the reason I started doing analysis videos. He actually, I think, put his finger on it when he said it really comes down to the world, and the entire reason that Friendship is Magic as a series worked was because Lauren Faust, the lady who created this new generation, the Generation 4 of My Little Pony, she really it is one of the finest cartoon series creators currently working. And her husband is Craig McCracken, who a lot of you will know if you keep up with cartoons. And you can just tell that the thought that went into building this world. There, you could actually buy the show Bible that she wrote. All the art and stuff. It's incredible to see the thought that went into what really, by all accounts, should have been a cash grab cartoon. And it really is. There's a reason why it is my favorite animated series. There's a lot to choose from. I love a lot of animated shows, but it really comes down to the world, one, and the characters that we get introduced to from this opening. Twilight, of course, is the star of the show. She's the princess's main pupil, and she discovers that the infamous Nightmare Moon, who is a legendary figure, that she might be returning to bring about eternal night, which is a cool concept in and of itself. I mean, and the motivation for it's very good because she's just jealous of her sister. So, even that villainous character, you get some interesting motivation. She could have just been pure evil. They didn't have to give her that kind of backstory. And then by making her a good guy, become a good guy, they set up for arguably most people's favorite princess character in the show, Princess Luna. And I always really thought that the characters, you could tell the characters were very important to these folks that were making this show. Again, there was just no reason to put in this much effort, because it was just to Hasbro, it was probably just about selling toys. But by putting in the effort to make a really lovable main character in the form of Twilight, who has, on the one hand, sort of this every girl sort of vibe. You can easily understand her, but she also is obsessive compulsive. She is has an incredibly fragile sense of stress, and if she gets stressed and not very far, she will have a complete mental breakdown to the point where she regularly causes mayhem. And so that's kind of an interesting little thing. Each character is associated with a certain element of friendship, laughter, generosity, honesty, loyalty, kindness. And what I like about the way the characters are designed is you would think in most kids' shows that they would take that sort of thing and they would say, oh, okay, yeah, so Rarity's just going to be generous all the time. That's just her thing. She's always generous. But no, they instead make her an incredibly selfish kind of bitch. They make Fluttershy somebody who is not just kind. She's either a doormat or she's on the verge of beating everybody up. Applejack is constantly lying to everybody, yet she is the element of honesty because she has the conscience to realize that the lies are not making things better, and to realize that honesty really is the best policy and come around to that. But her struggle is telling the truth. Rainbow Dash's struggle is to be loyal. She is loyal, sometimes to a fault, but then other times she's so self-ambitious that she's willing to give up all of her friends and her own well-being. So that's kind of an interesting thing to teach kids, and I always thought that was a good thing to teach kids, that, sometimes the best thing, and you can believe with all your heart this is the right thing to do. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the easy thing to do. And it might, in fact, be something you really struggle with. Maybe being honest is something you're really going to struggle with for your whole life. Most people do. It doesn't mean that that's not a worthy goal to pursue. So I've always really enjoyed that little aspect. Spike, the little dragon character who's a sidekick to Twilight, there was an old meme, sort of, that Spike was kind of useless, and he was kind of a waste of space. And in the first 2 seasons, 3 seasons, I kind of have to agree with that. He's kind of like an annoying little brother character. He never bothered me, but there can be times, especially in the episodes that are about him, where he is constantly causing his own issues. And so the episodes are always about him fixing his own issues. He does get better, to the point where by the end of the series is one of my favorite characters. But in that first little bit, in this first episode, it's not a very good showcasing of him. So this first episode, Twilight is trying to convince Celestia that, oh no, my Nightmare Moon's going to return, we got to do something. And Celestia is like, oh no, why don't you just enjoy the party? Because, we're planning this big party for the 1,000th year anniversary of Celestia's reign. And in fact, you need to go to this place called Ponyville. These names. Ponyville, Canterlot. Oh gosh. Philadelphia is one later on. The names are funny. But anyway, you need to go over there and help them set up for the party and try to make some friends. And of course, she's introduced to her 5 friends and their respective archetypes. And it's very well established, very good, straightforward establishment. You get an idea of who everybody is. For the most part, it's not too ham-fisted. Once in a while, you get certain things, like Rarity saying, "Sparkle always does the trick, does it not?" It's a little bit on the nose. But then you get some things that are just, they tell you so much about the character, but they also set up so much more about the world, like Applejack's family reunion coinciding with this. So Applejack introduces Twilight to her entire family from all across Equestria, and all of their names are Apple related, and that's a good bit of world building, but it's also funny. It's really funny because they're delivering their food, but it's also the food they're named after. That's an interesting little piece. Side note, as a Tennessean, Applejack is my favorite. I've got to say, I'm surrounded by people like the Apple family. My wife's family is a lot like the Apple family, come to think of it. I have my own Granny Smith. And so, anyway, for the most part, these characters are very well established, very nicely handled. They're not shoved down your throat, their character traits, but it gets across. Pinkie Pie's another one who's maybe a little bit over the top in this first episode. Some people are really annoyed by her. I like her, but I think there's a few times when she goes a little bit far. And this first episode is not a great showing for her either. That being said, she's better in the second half, episode 2. But for episode 1, it ends with Nightmare Moon returning. Twilight was right, and it's funny, Nightmare Moon was the one that got me hooked on the show. This was the reason that I was like, yeah, I gotta watch more of this. Because there's something almost like the little kid version of a Bond villain in Nightmare Moon. I can't explain it, and I've had several friends that I've convinced to watch the show with me who had that same thought, that Nightmare Moon is kind of awesome. And later on, when she comes back to being a good guy and becomes Princess Luna again, most people's favorite princess character in the show, and mine too. I love Princess Luna. Hello and welcome back, everybody. I'm the Rambling Director, and welcome to episode 2 retrospective of Friendship is Magic. And I just gotta say, starting off, something that really hit me more today than it did the other day when I made episode 1 is just how pastel this show was when it first started. It was very light. And as the show went on, the colors got progressively more neon and more dark and more contrasty, and but all the shades in between. It's very pastel starting off. So first off, we come right back in on Nightmare Moon, who is getting ready to terrorize everybody. The sun is not coming back. Night is going to last forever. And she immediately calls them, "You little fools." And I assume that was meant to be like a pun, like instead of fools, she says foals. Or maybe she's calling them children, like compared to her, they are children. It was really unclear, that little pun. And I think that's why they did not continue using that pun very much more after this. This episode and the first episode as well, I don't think I mentioned it, but they are much more flashy. And I don't mean like glitzy, I mean they look more like they were done as Flash animations, and they were done with Flash, so that makes more sense. However, going forward, the show increasingly got better in terms of the fluid quality of the animation, and after a while, you really could not tell that it was Flash animation, but there's a lot of flashy-looking stuff, especially in this episode, far more so than in the first episode. Jason Thiessen, the director for the first several seasons, he actually said at a convention I was at, I heard him in a panel say that he was frequently trying to push the envelope of what they could do with Flash animation, this just being 2010. And you can tell the character designs helped a lot with that. Things like, for instance, Johnny Test, which was also made with Flash, uses a lot of squares, and it makes it look cheaper than it actually is. The ponies are all very curvy, round shapes. Even their hair, for the most part, is very round, curvy shapes, and that helps to hide some of the limitations. But to be fair, the character movement was never bad, even in these early episodes, but it does get better going forward. I can hardly be the first one to point this out, but it is really funny when Rainbow Dash is in Twilight's face, accusing her of being a spy when she's meant to be the element of loyalty. That is kind of funny. And overall, the humor in this episode it overall gets better. Pinkie Pie is much funnier in this episode than she is the first episode. First episode, I really expected when I first saw it way back in 2012. I really thought, this character's going to be annoying. But she did grow on me, and I think the second episode proves she can be quite funny. Even her song, she has a song in this, and the songs the first few times were meant to be kind of like mocking kids' show songs. Over time, though, they moved towards more serious, actually good songs. And the music is really great in this show, but the music is not great in the first few episodes, and that's because it wasn't really meant to be. It was meant to be kind of making fun of things like Lazy Town and how forced the songs were. In fact, in this episode, when Pinkie starts singing, Twilight's like, "Oh my gosh, she's not doing this, is she?" And Rarity's like, yeah, she is. And that kind of sets the tone for Pinkie. But there's also some funny things like Rainbow Dash recapping how she saved Twilight after the commercial break, and Twilight being like, "Yeah, I know, I was there, Rainbow." Or Applejack, after Twilight gives this great speech on friendship. Well, great speech. It's a long speech on friendship and how important it is. And AJ's like, "Well, you know, Twilight, I thought you were just spouting a lot of hooey, but I guess you were right." And that's pretty funny. There is a lot of, like, the hero's journey tasks in this episode. It reminds me a lot of the tasks in the Sorcerer's Stone. How they were they're kind of forced to accentuate the hero's strengths. So, like, there's no reason to have a giant chest set protecting the Sorcerer's Stone. Clearly, it did not stop Quirrell and Voldemort from getting past it, but it was there because Ron needed to show those skills, right? So in the same way, we see the 5 friends of Twilight acting out their elements. So Fluttershy gets the chance to be kind, Rarity gets the chance to be generous, And a lot of that is handled very well. It was particularly Fluttershy. Rarities is extremely funny. I've always gotten a kick out of it. I think it's very funny. Stephen Magnet, the sea serpent. I can't talk today. He's a very funny character. A little stereotypy, but I think most of us have known somebody like Stephen Magnet, so it's not like an unrealistic stereotype. He's a very funny character. I like him. He comes back in season 5. So that's kind of fun. I would have liked, actually, when Rarity gives up her tail, she cuts off her tail as a sacrifice to help Stephen Magnet because half of his mustache is missing. I would have liked if she'd used her magic to turn that orange so it matched the other side of his mustache. As it is, when we leave him, he just has half a purple mustache. It is a little weird, because I feel like Rarity, of all the things she would know, she should know a spell to dye people's hair, right? Side note to everything else, I saw a Polly Pocket commercial while watching this, because I was watching it on YouTube. I didn't even know they still did Polly Pocket commercials, all right? And it was the cheapest, like, vlog-style commercial I've ever seen. Maybe they cut it from an actual vlog, but man, toy commercials have gone downhill since I was a kid, because toy commercials used to be, like, the best commercials. In addition, Applejack's little hero task is probably the one I like the least, because she's like, just let go, trust me, you'll be fine. And Twilight's like, that's not true. That always cracked me up, for not good reasons. And then she lets go, and Rainbow and Flutters catch her. But I always thought that moment just needed another rewrite. Applejack should have said something more like, "Our friends will catch you," and Twilight's like, "I don't know how can I be sure that's true?" Or something a little bit better. I'm not making a great case that I could have done it better, but like she could have been like, "I can't trust you guys. I've not known you long enough." Something like that. Then Applejack could be like, "Listen, I wouldn't tell you if it wasn't the honest truth. They will catch you." Something, again, I'm not making a great case that I could have done it better, but I just feel like there could have been something better done with that than what they did. The flaws in this episode are much more noticeable than they are later on in the series. For instance, everybody leaving and then immediately coming back into the room when Twilight shouts for help. There was just no reason for them to leave. That was just a contrivance to get them out of the room. Flaws like that are more noticeable, as well as flaws with the animation, as I stated before. But I can't really hold that against a show that I know for a fact has fantastic animation. By the end of this season, it's good, and by season like 4 and 5, it's fantastic. It is wonderful animation, especially considering the limitations of the software they're using. And the editing in this episode is really, really good. You can tell in this episode where Jason Thiessen, as we talked about, was trying to push the envelope with things like these pans across Twilight, that kind of connect and kind of wipe transition into flashbacks, and then how we start on close-ups of the characters and then zoom out and the backgrounds change and now we're back to the present. Those are really cool little touches that it probably would have been difficult to have done, and yet they pulled them off with surprisingly nice flowing energy. I really liked that. And I think I said before, I think it's fun that the elements that they're known for are elements they actually struggle with. So as soon as they are awarded their elements of harmony and they officially are like the spirit of those elements, Rarity immediately is like, "Oh, my beautiful tail, I'll never part with you again." That's quite funny. So they defeat Nightmare Moon by the magic of friendship, as you would imagine. The spark that reveals the 6th element, which is Twilight's element, the element of magic, is it's quite a cool little idea. It's predictable, but it's a cute little idea. And I particularly like that idea, because friendship is kind of a cool thing when you think about it. Like, it in no way goes along with our evolution. Really, like, allying for the sake of survival is not the same thing as developing familial relationships with people outside of your family. Friendship is kind of a magical thing. It is kind of a crazy thing that we would have that. And so, I really like that element of the show. And of course, Princess Luna returns. Nightmare Moon is shattered and she becomes Princess Luna again. Princess Celestia shows up and is like, "We should rule together, baby sister. That's what we were supposed to do." And Luna, of course, accepts that friendship back. It's very quick, and a lot of the villains in this show, when they turn, not all of them do, thankfully, but when the ones that do turn back to being good guys, it's one of those things that's wrapped up way too quickly. It is a problem with the show continuing forward, although it does get better after, let's say, season 6 onward. That does get better, but season 6 itself also has quite a turn with a character. At the end, Twilight is talking to Celestia, and she's like, "But you told me all this was an old pony's tale, not to worry about it." And Celestia's like, "I told you to make friends, nothing more. And it's always bothered me because Twilight's completely right." Celestia did say more than that. She did say that it was all a bunch of hooey, as to quote Applejack. But anyway, so as you might expect, Twilight is encouraged to stay in Ponyville and continue to learn about the magic of friendship. And she's going to send a report to Princess Celestia at the end of every episode going forward, telling what she's learned about friendship this week. It's a classic setup for a children's show, and they actually stick with that idea for a good long time before dropping it during a later development in the story, but I won't spoil that for now. As a pilot, these first 2 episodes, I really love them. I've always thought they worked very well. They are more little kitty than a lot of the rest of the show is later, but I don't really hold that against the show because they couldn't have imagined what it was going to become. And functionally, for what it is, I think it works very well at establishing this sort of hero's journey development that Twilight is going to get going forward, especially with the plans that Lauren Faust had for Twilight, which eventually would come to fruition, but much later than Lauren Faust would have imagined. Hello and welcome, I'm the Rambling Director, and today we're doing another retrospective review on Friendship is Magic. This one is Season 1, Episode 3, The Ticketmaster. And I remember very clearly the thing that stood out to me when I first watched this episode in 2012 was just how funny the show is. And it gets funnier from this point on, but especially the first 2 episodes are not that funny. And to be honest, they're nowhere near the quality of the rest of the series. So I didn't really know what to expect going into episode 3, and at the time I was still on the fence. I wouldn't have called myself a fan, but I definitely had the intention of watching the rest of the show after watching this episode. It was a very good kind of opening to the slice of life style episodes that the show would later become known for. I really enjoyed the humor in this episode, and it's clearly geared towards a person who was a little bit older. I had grown up with, TV Land and a lot of older comedies and stuff, so I kind of got the idea from this episode right off that it was geared to, the humor was geared towards an older audience, probably the parents and other older people who were going to be watching with their children. The reason I can pretty firmly say that is because I don't imagine any 7-year-old in the year 2012 when I watched it, or even 2010 when it came out, being familiar with Benny Hill. Yet there's quite a lengthy scene in this episode that is a direct reference to the Benny Hill show. And I just think it's hysterical, including the parody of Yakety Sax, which plays in the background. So that was just a little cool thing that I really was impressed by the first time I saw the show. Coming back to it now, years later, although I've seen this episode many, many times in that intervening period, coming back to it with the intention of making a video retrospectively at kind of analyzing it, I noticed that the humor in this whole episode is really, really good. And I didn't really realize it at the time, because I didn't know enough about the characters, but I think this was the episode that endeared me to Rarity, who is one of my very favorite characters, and it's a lot of it is her humor. I think Tabitha St. Germain, the actress who plays Rarity, is kind of the unsung hero of Friendship is Magic. She voices most of the background characters when they get speaking roles that are like substantive, including later on voicing Derpy Hooves, who is probably the most famous background character. She's kind of the symbol of the pony fandom too. And Tabitha St. Germain is just amazing. And a lot of it comes from her improv. Apparently, she would improv a lot more than the other actors. And you can tell that when there are crowd scenes and people are talking, because she will say some of the funniest crap. We'll get to that as we get to more of that later on, but I just want to point it out for now. Her humor is really funny, and some of these lines would not be funny if it weren't for her saying them. So what's this episode about? Twilight gets sent tickets to the Grand Galloping Gala, a big social occasion in Canterlot every year, and Celestia gives her a ticket with one extra ticket so she can take a friend. Now, later on, a few seasons down the road, we find out that all of these tickets have a +1. Maybe you could argue that the reason they have a +1 later is because of this episode, but we never hear that explanation, so it kind of comes off as a little bit of a plot hole when you know that later. Twilight instantly is inundated with her friends desperately wanting to go to the Grand Galloping Gala with her as her guest, and they all start competing for her affections to win the ticket. It's kind of a classic comedy setup, right? You've seen this setup a million times before. What I think is really exceptional about this episode is that they find some fantastic reasons for these characters to want to go. And they all fit their personalities so well. Whereas typically when you see this plot, the people who want to go, it's more just like, hey, I'm your friend, you should want to bring me. There's not usually this depth of reasoning, whereas the majority of this episode is taken up with finding out the reasons why they want to go. I have to say, though, there is one pitfall to this, and that is that Applejack is the only one with an actual good reason. So, Applejack wants to go because she can sell her goods at the gala and make a lot of money for her farm. And in doing so, she can replace the barn, replace the plow, and of course replace Granny's hip. She apparently needs a hip replacement, because in a world of magic, people still need hip replacements, of course. Rainbow Dash wants to go so she can meet the Wonderbolts and impress them and become a Wonderbolt, which is her dream, right? Rarity wants to go because she has this fantasy that she'll meet Prince Blueblood there, who will be her Prince Charming, and she'll become a princess. Fluttershy wants to go so she can see the garden and the animals. Pinkie Pie wants to go because it's supposed to have the biggest, greatest party of all time, and she's all about that. Applejack is the only one who has a legit good reason to want to go to this thing, you know? And when Twilight is like, you all have great reasons, I hate to disappoint you, the easy answer is take Applejack. Because this is going to affect her family. It's not some pipe dream like Rarity or Rainbow Dash. I shouldn't say pipe dream because Rainbow Dash becomes a Wonderbolt, but it's not some frivolous need like Fluttershy or Pinkie Pie. So, yeah, that's a little silly, I guess. But also, I do love how when they start doing her favors, they're specialized favors. Favors only each pony could do. Applejack is the best cook. Now, Pinkie Pie is a baker as well, but Applejack can cook anything. So Applejack makes her all this food because there's this running joke where Twilight is hungry for the entire episode, and the episode ends with them going to get food. You never see her get food. It's really unsatisfying because she was hungry the whole time. And then there's a rainstorm, and man, I just love this joke. So it's raining, and Twilight is outside on the patio eating at this restaurant, and the rain is falling around her. She looks up, and Rainbow has busted a hole in the cloud so the rain won't get on Twilight, so she can keep sitting out there. And Twilight's like, you're not just trying to get the ticket, are you? And it cuts to a low angle of Rainbow Dash, and the sun looks like she is wearing a halo, and there's this heavenly music in the background. It's hysterically funny by itself, but then you add in Rainbow saying, no, I would do this for anyone. And then we cut to a wide shot of everybody else running in the rain trying to get out of it, and Twilight is the only one she's keeping dry. So then Twilight says, listen, I don't feel comfortable with this. Zip up that cloud and leave. So she does, and Twilight's sandwich, which she was just about to eat, is ruined, and she's soaking wet. So that's 3 really good jokes, character-driven jokes right on top of each other, and then we come with number 4 because Rarity shows up, and again, Tabitha St. Germain. This wouldn't be funny if it wasn't for her deadpan awesome delivery, where she comes up to her and goes, Twilight, It's raining. Gets me every time. I can't explain it, can't give you the logic behind it. It just makes me laugh. I love it. And we immediately go into my favorite rarity line in the whole series, which is really saying something. This.
Oh no, it's quite all right. After all, we are the best of friends, are we not?
I personally quote this to my friends all the time. Whenever they say something about, doing something or, me doing a favor, I go, it's nothing. After all, we are the best of friends, are we not? In terms of some visual humor, when we find out about Rarity's dream to meet Prince Blueblood, we see him and he looks like Fabio, like the most foppish person you can imagine. And again, Tabitha St. Germain's delivery is just everything, because she goes, she's talking about it. It's all in this very dreamy way. And he will ask me for my hoof in marriage. And I will say, yes! Yeah, she just screams that word. And it's really takes you off guard if you're not expecting it, because she just is so wistful the rest of the time. And again, with that great delivery, she thinks Twilight's taking Pinky to the ball. And she goes, how could you? It's just almost an Ellen DeGeneres sort of delivery sometimes. I really can't stress that enough. It's the reason I think why everything Tabitha St. Germain is in, she tends to be the best part of it, with the exception of My Little Pony, strangely enough, because everything is so good in this series that, she's just kind of on a par with everything else, which is high praise because, again, Tabitha St. Germain is like one of my favorite voice actors. Again, there is a Benny Hill-style chase scene with a Yakety Sax knockoff playing in the background. I love that scene. I especially love at the beginning how Pinkie Pie accidentally outs this ticket nonsense to the whole town, and then the whole town is trying to get in on it. And there's this one pony who is holding something in her hand, and her hoof is wrapped around it like a hand. It's horrifying. And there's this other pony, and she's just holding carrots. Like, they're just magnetized to her hand, which we later will get really used to that in Generation 5, because that's how they carry everything in Gen 5. But in this season, in this series, that was really weird. It kind of went against everything we established in the season to have that pony just holding that thing in her hoof. So that was really strange. So the episode comes to a conclusion. Twilight, I thought this was quite good. Twilight's friends all give up the ticket. Except for Rainbow, who for a second is like, you all gave it up, that means the ticket's mine. And then she feels bad and is like, I don't want it either. So Twilight sends the tickets back to Celestia because she doesn't want to go to the ball at all if her friends can't go too. Celestia, I love this. Celestia sends back a letter and just says, why didn't you say so? And gives her enough tickets for all of them to go. And as they walk out, they say they're going to treat Twilight to lunch. Spike gets a ticket because suddenly, even though he didn't want to go to the gala, he felt really left out when he didn't get a ticket. So he gets to go too. And we're left questioning how all of these tickets are floating above their respective owners' heads. Maybe Twilight enchanted them, but the other ponies don't have the magic to carry these tickets. So how the heck are these things just floating around? But that spell is never used again, so I guess we just won't think too deeply about it. So that was Season 1, Episode 3, The Ticketmaster. I really like this episode. I think it is, again, a really funny episode. They made a good choice by having this episode establish early that the show can do some really comedic, fun stuff. As Season 1 goes on, we find out that the Grand Galloping Gala is being built up as the season finale. It's the only one-part season finale besides Season 3. And it is also the only one that is not really story-driven. It is entirely character-driven. So the first episode of Applebuck season starts off with Applejack, and we get to see a conversation between her and her brother, who we haven't really got to hear much from, Big Macintosh, and he becomes a bigger character as the show goes forward. He's not yet acquired his signature catchphrase, which is yup and nope, which for a long time was all he said. In this episode and Season 1 in general, he does tend to be a little bit more talkative. He's hurt himself, so Applejack is required to do all the apple bucking, a process in which the apple family kicks the trees to knock down the apples to collect them for harvest time. It's kind of a neat little world-building idea, and it also establishes the Earth Pony's forms of magic. We see Pegasi can fly, unicorns obviously can use telekinesis from their horns, but Earth Pony magic is a little more subtle. Earth Pony magic basically means that they have super strength and they are really good with plants. That second part would be expounded upon much more in Generation 5. They keep that part pretty subtle in Generation 4. So going into the episode, there's a stampede. The cattle are terrified by Rattlesnake and they charge into Ponyville. Luckily, Applejack and her dog, who we meet, I think, for the first time in this episode, Winona, they wrangle the cattle back up. The cattle all have Wisconsin accents for some reason, which is kind of funny. So she is given a grand award by the city for her services rendered, being an epic friend to save them all from certain death. And Twilight is trying to give a speech kind of introducing Applejack. It's several note cards deep, which I think is very fitting in her character, and it establishes her character going forward even better. Applejack is sleep-deprived and exhausted from bucking all these apples, and when she comes in, she gives one of my favorite little Applejack moments ever when she sees the trophy and her sleep-addled brain can't process her own reflection. It's a really cute little moment. We also get one of my favorite Applejack lines. This episode for Applejack is very quotable. She has some really good lines in this one.
I like helping the pony folks and stuff.
And much like Tabitha St. Germain, who I praised in the last episode, a lot of this one is Ashley Ball's performance as Applejack. Later on, we would see her shine when because she's also the voice of Rainbow Dash, when she gets some good lines as Rainbow. But Applejack just is one of those characters like Rarity who gets a lot of memorable lines, and some of them are not really, "You're welcome" is a simple line, but then you hear her say it.
You're welcome!
And for some reason, it's really funny. Twilight goes to Applejack to warn her that she needs help, but Applejack is such a stubborn and prideful person, she won't accept any help. Earlier on in the episode, during that whole award ceremony thing, we established that Applejack was scheduled to help her friends with some various tasks during this week that this episode is based in. And what happens, of course, is that set up for later in the episode when Applejack is just too exhausted to actually be able to perform these tasks adequately. So her selfishness and pride in not asking for help with the apples is directly affecting her ability to be a good friend. Applejack makes everybody sick by mishearing the directions for muffins. She causes another stampede, which is a nice little circular little callback. She causes a stampede, this time of bunnies, because she's too sleepy to process that bunnies are not the same thing as cows. The flower ponies are introduced in this episode, and they are one of my favorites. I love the joke they pull off with this episode, and it really shows how good of a straight man Twilight is. And Twilight later will be continuing to be a straight man to many other characters, even though she herself can go crazy sometimes. But she is a really good straight man character.
The horror! The horror! It was awful! A disaster! A horrible, horrible disaster! I don't get it.
In the end, Applejack realizes she does need help, because after all of her efforts, when she thinks she's done, she realizes she's less than halfway done, and she begs for help, at which point Twilight and the girls come in. Twilight proves that magic basically makes the economy in this world make no sense, and she thanks them all for being her friend. Cute little episode. I like it. As an introduction to Applejack's stubbornness, it's not bad. However, I think maybe there could have been better episodes. We see later that there are better episodes with this sort of theme as far as Applejack's character goes, but I like this one. I think it's a good way of introducing the fact that Applejack also has some strong, overpowering characteristics that are already there, and also some growth that we will see throughout the rest of the series. She will have to learn to become more humble and more reliant on others. That's a really good lesson. Problem is, it really is a lesson that you would expect more to see for the element of loyalty. Rainbow Dash. And a common complaint in the first 4 seasons is that Rainbow and Applejack really should have reversed elements. That Rainbow should have been the element of honesty, and Applejack should have been the element of loyalty, because they are, respectively, more honest and more loyal. I have to disagree, though, for reasons I mentioned in the first episode retrospective. I think it's really cool that the characters, they're known for these things. They represent the elements of these parts of friendship, and yet those are elements they struggle with. Applejack, we will learn later, when she was a kid, was a compulsive liar. So honesty is something she struggles with, which makes it more rewarding when she's honest. Rainbow is kind of a selfish person, and loyalty to her friends, when it costs her something, is hard for her. And so when she is loyal and gives up something in order to be loyal, it means a lot more. So yeah, if we were going at, that these elements represent the entirety of the personality of these ponies, I would agree they should have swapped, but I don't think so. I think it's really cool, actually, that these are things they struggle with, including Twilight, representing magic, and she abuses magic. We'll see more of that in later episodes. For now, the second episode of today's review. Honestly, it's a really good Pinkie Pie episode. Technically, it's also a Rainbow Dash episode, but really Pinkie kind of is the star after the first third. I'll explain what I mean in a second. So the episode opens with Pinkie pursuing Rainbow Dash, and Rainbow being really annoyed and making it clear that she does not really value Pinkie's friendship, doesn't really want to be her friend, thinks Pinkie's kind of annoying. I really like that we open, that's our opening handshake to this episode, to say that just because all of these people are friends with Twilight, and some of them are friends with each other, it doesn't necessarily mean that from episode 1, they were all friends in the same way. Pinkie and Rainbow seem to have been more acquaintances at this point, and that's kind of an interesting way to go. Obviously, she knows Pinkie because she lives in Ponyville, but to say that they're really close friends who actually have some common interests or even just a mutual respect for each other really would be going a bit too far at the beginning of this episode. So this episode really kind of develops them to a point where by the end, they are truly friends. Now, maybe you don't interpret it that way, but that's kind of how I felt the first time I watched it. It just seemed like they weren't really friends when they started off. Pinkie ends up persuading Rainbow to hang out by basically doing pranks. Rainbow realizes, hey, that's something we have in common, Pinkie. I love to do pranks. Let's go prank everybody in Ponyville. And they do some good ones. They make Rarity inhale like sneezing powder. They give Twilight disappearing ink as she's doing a science experiment. And, of course, they paint the apples of the apple orchard, which must have taken hours, if not days, to do, with paint that washes off in the rain. So it scares Applejack, makes her angry, and then she sees the paint washes off, and she has a good laugh about it. Pranks are something I could believe both of these people would like to do, and yet it doesn't try to make them seem too similar. They get different things out of why they like to do pranks. And I appreciate the fact that they are kind of complementary souls, Pinkie and Rainbow. It also shows that Pinkie actually in some ways is more level-headed than Rainbow, because she has a moral compass about who she will prank. She won't prank Fluttershy because Flutters is just so sensitive that the most harmless prank would hurt her feelings. And Rainbow was going to prank Flutters and admits Pinkie is right. That's a cool kind of little way of showing that these two actually need each other. Rainbow's old friend from flight camp, Gilda the Griffin, comes to visit, and her introduction is pretty good. With a wild rock stinger behind her and a really intimidating design, Gilda actually is kind of a character that you wouldn't necessarily want to be friends with from the get-go, and that's really good character design because you learn she's kind of a jerk. Gilda basically wants to monopolize Rainbow's time while visit and thinks Pinkie is really, really lame. There is a major criticism I have with this episode, and it's where Gilda is concerned. Her dialogue is not terrible, but there are times when she just says things like Captain Lame-o, and that's the only real time in the series that I can think of where, and I mean the whole series, all 9 seasons, you can tell that it was 40-year-old people writing a kid's show, because nobody would say Captain Lame-O. I mean, what is this, like 1992? She's actually really abusive to Pinky, which makes some of the humor, the slapstick, more funny, but it also makes you root for Pinky all the more. As somebody who kind of, again, found Pinky a little bit annoying by this point, when I first watched the series, this episode really endeared me to her because it made her the underdog. In fact, they do that even more so by having Pinky go to Twilight to complain about Gilda, and Twilight basically telling her that she thinks that she's overreacting. Pinky goes out and she witnesses Gilda out in the wild without Rainbow Dash, and she is a thief and a bully who screams at Fluttershy. And that's the thing that sets Pinky off, and she decides she has to deal with this extreme measures, Pinkie Pie style, which means a party. What else would it mean? It kind of leads to a moment that I think is like the first real funny Fluttershy moment. And it also establishes my personal favorite type of humor to see from Fluttershy, which was her dry wit, which just once in a while comes out.
Your Auntie Pinkie Pie's got it all taken care of. I'm a year older than you.
All through this party, there are pranks set up all around the party, and Gilda keeps setting them off. For instance, eating a pepper, like a snack that's laced with pepper, so she breathes fire, and then she tries to get a drink, and a dribble glass, so she can't extinguish her raging thirst. Pinky also shakes claws, hoofs, whatever, with her, and has a joy buzzer in her palm, or her hoof paw, whatever you call them. This also sets up my personal favorite type of Pinkie Pie humor, which is when Pinky is genuine. She's not trying within the universe of the show to be funny. She just kind of is. Like, her simple logic.
Hey, I'm watching you like a hawk.
Why? Can't you watch me like a griffin?
They play Pin the Tail on the Pony, which, come to think of it, is kind of a weird game. It'd be like if I played Pin the Butt on the Bin. I don't know. Gilda, because she thinks Pinky is setting off all these pranks to make a fool of her, doesn't trust her, goes the wrong way once she's blindfolded, and absolutely embarrasses herself, makes a complete fool of herself. And then she loses her cool, screams at everybody, tells them they're all lame, and blames Pinky. Then turns out, shock, horror, surprise, M. Night Shyamalan twist, Rainbow Dash was the one who was setting all the pranks. I have to be honest with you. In hindsight, I realized that kind of should have been the obvious twist of this. When I first watched it, I was actually just enjoying myself so much, I didn't think about it. Like, it actually did take me off guard. I was like, oh, well, I mean, yeah, of course, that makes perfect sense. What a good direction to go with this. Gilda and Rainbow have a few brief words in which Gilda accuses her of being a quote-unquote flip-flop, cool 1 second and lame the next. And Rainbow says if all you care about is your friends being cool, then maybe you need to find some new ones. She then apologizes to Pinky for the way that Gilda treated her, and we get a cute little moment where Pinky kind of is like, oh, well, you know, if you want to hang out with party boopers, that's your affair. I'm not judging you. It's kind of a cute little resolution. They shake hoofs and they both joy buzz each other. That's cute. I like it. I like the resolution of this one for more so than I typically would with this sort of episode. Yeah, Twilight gives the moral at the end by writing a letter to Celestia. You expect that. What I love about it is that Princess Celestia at the end starts to reply to Twilight, and she accidentally uses invisible ink, just like the prank that Rainbow used earlier. And then she's like, oops, wrong ink. And that, my friends, sets up for something that was terribly underutilized until literally the last season. They do explore it more in the IDW comics, but they completely wasted this premise, in my opinion. That sets up Princess Celestia as a prankster. And we get some hints here and there, but my gosh, I would love to see Hasbro do like a sequel series. Bring back Nicole Oliver and Tabitha St. Germain as Luna, and just do like one season. Just give me that. Give me one season where we just see Celestia and Luna pranking people. So yeah, I love that ending. Fantastic. overall, both of these episodes, 2 very good episodes of season 1, and they establish early on that we're going to get some really good character work for these characters, way above what you would expect in a TV show that was originally meant to be marketed towards 7-year-olds. This kind of sets the tone that it's only going to get better from here, and it does. This one is Boastbusters, which I almost couldn't get the name out. For whatever reason, that got me really tongue-tied. This is an interesting one because it introduces one of my favorite characters, and there's large portions of this episode that I really, really love, but it does have a major issue with it. It's the first episode I have a truly major issue that I think gets in the way of the story. So let's dive right into it. As we start off this episode, Twilight is doing new magic. She's learned 25 new spells with the help of Spike, of course, the last of which was to give him a luxurious Hercule Poirot style mustache. Twilight in this one outright reveals to us what you probably have expected by this point, which is that Twilight's special talent is magic. We get more into special talents and even destiny itself in the lore of this show as we go forward. But right now, one of the things I love about the show is that they don't try to front load you with a ton of knowledge like Star Wars or Star Trek even does a lot of the time. Instead, they feed you things very naturally rather than trying to pretend that they wouldn't know this stuff. They live in this world. So all of this stuff is old hat for them. And so we learn these things more realistically, and we learn them on a kind of a decelerated timeline. But yeah, her special talent is magic. And a unicorn magician comes to town named Trixie. Trixie, the Great and Powerful, one of my favorite characters in the show. And later on, I think it's season 7, when she officially becomes like a main character in her own right. She becomes not just a recurring character once or twice a season, but a main character in the show. I love this character. She is so funny. Her complete full of herselfness is just mind-boggling. I mean, the amount to I don't know. Like, I think maybe she might love herself almost as much as modern journalists do, and that's really saying something. She comes telling them this great story about how she vanquished an Ursa Major, which is like a gigantic bear in mythology. And everybody's so impressed, and they're like, oh, nobody could ever do such a thing. It's incredible. And the Ursa Major, by the way, has a fantastic design. It's see-through. It's like it's transparent, but it's got stars going through it because the Ursa is a constellation. That's a really clever little bit that kids, again, are not going to get. That was clearly sort of a reference more for adults, and a very specific adult at that, because the majority of people are not going to know that much about the constellations. We also meet Snips and Snails in this episode, and most people don't like Snips and Snails, and yeah, I mean, they were 2 of the first male characters to be introduced. I mean, what did you have at this point? Big Macintosh had a couple lines. You had Spike, who's pretty much useless. And then you have Snips and Snails, who are just annoying. They... everything people complain about Spike in the first couple seasons, it's like they are the distillation of those things. I just understand why people don't like them. That being said, they're not in a lot of episodes, and later on, in fact, something happens, which I'll get to later, in an episode involving a sport called buckball, which kind of gives you a different appreciation for them as people. So, I don't hate them, but they are quite annoying in this episode, because basically everything bad that happens is their fault, and it's kind of hard to overlook that. But that's not the problem with the episode I mentioned earlier, by the way. The problem that I have with it is that the main 6, minus Twilight, well, actually, also minus Fluttershy. Fluttershy doesn't really do anything wrong in this episode, but they kind of become... they're hecklers for the majority of this episode. And it is a little irritating because Trixie is a showwoman, okay? She's just doing her job, trying to earn a living. She's full of herself. She's way too prideful, granted. But she's also just an entertainer trying to do her job. And the main six are like, again, minus Twilight and Fluttershy, are like, oh, she's so full of herself. We have to show her up. And they try. And ironically, Trixie actually does show them up in response, which makes them seem like a bunch of jealous jerks. It doesn't really seem, I don't know, it almost makes Trixie seem almost underdog-ish at times. And now they bring it back from the precipice of that by having Trixie be so full of herself that, I mean, you just love to dislike this girl. She's amazing. And every iteration of her, by the way, is not much better. Even when she becomes a good guy, a main character later, she's still pretty bad. And I like that about Trixie. She changes, actually genuinely changes as a result of a long-term relationship, rather than as the result of shooting her with the elements of harmony and turning her good, which happens quite a few times in this series. I mean, even in the sequel episode, when Trixie is outdone, it's because Twilight outwits her. And in this case, in this episode, she outmagics her, but we'll get to that in a second. So Trixie stays in Ponyville for a little while, entertaining Snips and Snails with stories in exchange for their manual labor. Their children. She is exploiting child labor. That's all I'm going to say about that. I don't know the laws of Equestria when it comes to that. Later on, the Cutie Mark Crusaders are working jobs and they're still in what seems like elementary school. So maybe child labor just works differently in Equestria. So anyway, Snips and Snails go to find an Ursa Major so that they can actually see her vanquish this bear monster. And by the way, you can play a drinking game with all the times they say vanquish. They don't say killed or destroyed, or even, I don't know, anything else, defeated. They just keep saying vanquished over and over. That feels like it should have been taken care of during like a rewriting phase, so that just once in a while they use a synonym. Well, they wake up in Ursa and bring it to town, and it is destroying everything, and Trixie tries to do her best to, subdue it, but she does not have the talent, she does not have the magic to do it, and it's pretty funny. She, all framed in close-ups. There's a really good joke where she ties up the Ursa. There's also a really good moment where Snips and Snails respond to her failed attempts and just go, well, that was a dud, and that's pretty funny. Now, the reason why I have this issue with them kind of being hecklers is that they make Twilight feel like having magic is a bad thing. And the thing is, when you set up the lore of your world so that you have 3 races, and they call them that, 3 races, Earth ponies, Pegasi, and unicorns, and you make one race feel bad for something inherent to their race, it doesn't paint the 4 of them that are doing this, it doesn't paint them in a good light, And the fact that, of course, now that you could say that Twilight should have communicated with her friends and told them that they were making her feel bad, or asked, do you guys really think this? Or maybe Twilight should have thought more critically about it and been like, maybe they are just mad because she's showing off. Maybe the magic has nothing to do with it. But at the same time, it is a little bit distracting that they are making Twilight feel so bad in a race-related way. That being said, Twilight uses her magic, she comes out and does it in spite of her fear, and she does get the Ursa taken care of by giving it a gigantic bottle made of the town water tower and feeding it, lulling it to sleep, and then levitating it back into its cave. Then we find out, a really funny twist, that's not an Ursa Major, it's an Ursa Minor. It's the baby. Which means Snips and Snails lured an Ursa Minor, a minor, away from its parents, so Snips and Snails are guilty of kidnapping. this is one of those episodes you really can't think too hard about. Because if you do, it very quickly falls apart. Again, though, with all of that out of the way, it is kind of cool that they do make a point of Twilight. Again, she's so hurt when she's like, please guys, don't hate me. But they do explain to her, like, magic has nothing to do with it. They just didn't like her being a blowhard. And they love that Twilight is magical and that magic is a part of who she is and she should be proud of it. That was a good save. I don't know. Again, it just seems like this episode might have needed another rewrite. But Trixie's character, by and large, is pretty much perfect. I love Trixie. She's such a good character. And as an establishing episode to show her for the blowhard she is, I thought this was perfect. And it starts a running joke with her where every time she leaves, she says her, because she talks in third person all the time, she says her name, throws down the smoke bomb, and runs away.
But you will never have the amazing, show-stopping ability of the great and powerful Trixie!
So all in all, this is not one of my higher-rated episodes in Season 1 as far as the quality goes, but I can never fault an episode that introduces one of my favorite characters in the series. So take that with a grain of salt. It's definitely worth a watch. Again, you just can't think too hard about it, but I've seen this series dozens and dozens of times, so I have had the opportunity to think way too hard about it. Today, we are talking about Season 1, Episode 7 of Friendship is Magic. This one is called Dragon Shy, and as you might guess from the title, it is a Fluttershy episode. Now, I just want to say before we jump into this that I like Fluttershy. Fluttershy is fine. She's my least favorite of the main six. I know, I'm a terrible person. For some reason, Fluttershy is like everybody's favorite, and I just personally never understood why. On the other hand, I don't do that criticism that a lot of people do where I say, she just learns the same lesson over and over. She's an introvert. I expect her to have to learn to be more outgoing over and over and over again. I don't have a problem with that. The issue that I have with her is honestly just that the episodes built around her don't usually showcase her learning the lesson that well, in my opinion. I feel like a lot of the time, Fluttershy is a good character on her own, but sometimes the way they have her learn her lessons, it's more predictable. From the kind of first 5 minutes, you already know what lesson Fluttershy is going to learn, and you already could pretty much write an essay on how she's gonna do it. It's very cut and dry, paint by numbers sort of episode. Fluttershy has to learn to be more aggressive, she's gonna fail, she's gonna inconvenience her friends and cause them a lot of trouble, and then at the end, when their lives are in danger, she's gonna stand up for them, because when it comes to defending her friends, she can overcome the shyness and the timidity that she has. It's not a bad lesson or anything. It just, in a series where the episodes were so good at not being what you expected all the time, when you see one like this, it does stick out. That being said, I front-loaded a lot of this with the criticism about the episode, so let me tell you some of the things I like. One, it gave us this little meme that became very popular of Rainbow Dash saluting. Another thing is that the humor throughout the episode kind of does save it. Again, the plot is the issue I have with this episode. The characters are all themselves, and they are great characters, and so I still watch this episode. When I'm watching through the show in order, I've never skipped this episode. Sometimes I've skimmed through it, but just to see some of the jokes, but I never just outright skip it. Like, it's not one that I wouldn't watch for the issues I have with it. It's just one that I think the comedy and the characters are really the thing you have to watch it for, because the plot's doing nothing new. And as far as the comedy goes, there are some really good moments, like when they're getting ready for battle, and there's like this A-team sort of parody that they do. It's a great little scene, and it kind of breaks up the tone in a way that the show only does sparingly, and I think that's why it works so well when they do it. In another scene, we see Rarity, and again, Rarity is one of my favorite ponies. Tabitha St. Germain, I think, is like the unsung hero of this show. And her attempting to steal the dragon's gold, showing off again that the element of generosity really struggles with not being selfish, to the point of theft. This is pretty awesome.
I was this close to getting that diamond.
You mean getting rid of that dragon?
Oh, yeah, sure.
There are some really good moments for Fluttershy to shine in this episode, so I don't want to seem like I'm just, having a go at Fluttershy. It's just that this episode, I don't think, gave her really the time to shine like she should have. If the whole episode had been a little bit better at kind of subverting what I thought I was going to see, and maybe giving us some real build-up to Fluttershy's ultimate break at the end, where she just screams at the dragon that he is not going to hurt her friends. If we got some more build-up to that, I wouldn't have much to complain about. It seemed like a very, again, kind of paint-by-numbers episode, and in terms of the plot. But where, again, it does shine is the comedy is good, for the most part, and the, like when Pinkie Pie and Rarity are playing tic-tac-toe, that's quite a funny little joke they just kind of throw at you, and it's not over the top, it's just a little verbal joke, you can easily miss it, but it always gets a laugh out of me. So you have some really good moments throughout this one, and unlike Ghostbusters, I don't feel like it ultimately breaks any of the universe's rules. It doesn't have anything that causes me to dislike the characters in that episode, which again Ghostbusters did. So overall, a good episode if you're watching it for the characters, but I don't think anybody's watching this one for the plot. So this episode is very Rarity and Applejack centric, who I've already said are my two individually favorite characters in the main six, but they are also my two favorite characters to watch them interact with each other. Every time they are together, they are just so funny, and the comedy of their episodes shines, I think, more brightly than any other pair of the main six interacting in an individual episode. So they get caught out in a rainstorm. They've been trying to cut down branches so that when the Pegasi start this storm, it won't knock over branches and damage property. It's kind of another interesting little bit of world building, because it kind of gives you an idea that, like, not only do the Pegasi have to create the weather, but also all of the other ponies have a role in making sure that weather goes off without a hitch. Again, just a nice little subtle bit of world building to it. Sort of like later on when we see that the fall leaves, the autumn leaves, do not fall off the trees unless the ponies cause it to happen. So Rarity and Applejack seek shelter in the Golden Oaks Library, which is where Twilight Sparkle lives. And I love the fact that the library is made from a tree, and Applejack, because she is not a stupid character, a stupid Southerner stereotype, which as a Tennessean I appreciate that she's not a stereotype, she actually is smart enough to ask, hold on a second, is it really an intelligent idea for us to be in a tree in the middle of a lightning storm? And so they have to, again, add another little bit of world building to that. Yeah, some of these buildings are made out of trees, but it's okay, because there's magical lightning rods that keep them as safe structures to live in. Again, no child of 7 years old is going to question this in a fantasy show. So it really means a lot that Lauren Faust and her team put in the work to have a logical reason for how these things function in a way that is naturalistic and that we in our actual reality can understand. Now, the situational comedy is just so good in this episode. So, like, when they first get to the library, Rarity tells Applejack that she needs to go outside and wash off her muddy hooves before coming in. But then when Applejack comes in, and Twilight and Rarity have already started the sleepover, they all both have mud masks on, which prompts Applejack rightly to question, hold on, why couldn't I come in with my muddy hooves, but you guys can put mud on your faces? There's also something really adorable about seeing Twilight, Rarity, and Applejack with curlers in their hairs.
There's messy and there's just plain rude.
You know, there's fussy and there's just plain getting on my nerves.
Now, Twilight, throughout this episode, there's a really funny bit which works up until the very end, where she is reading a book about how to have a good sleepover. That's really good, consistent character work, because Twilight has shown functionally that she just cannot really function socially without reading information about how to do it. A clever little bit of storytelling, even if it's been done before, but she is an absolute stickler for the rules on this sleepover. So the next thing, of course, is they have to tell scary stories. And the stories are really funny. Like Applejack is like, I got a story about a pony who annoys everyone with her unnecessary neatness. And of course, she's talking about Rarity.
That's not a real story. You made it up.
It is a ghost story. They're all made up.
Now, these bad scary stories prompts Twilight to tell a story of the headless horse. I love that pun. So, Twilight actually scares the bejesus out of both of them, which is, again, a nice little subversion, because you wouldn't expect Twilight to be able to really pull that off, but yet she doesn't. They make s'mores, to which Applejack, again, behaves in a way that Rarity finds uncouth. Some of the comedy beats, they kind of hit where you expect, but they're handled very well. And, like, when they play Truth or Dare, there's a really good moment where Applejack dares Rarity to go outside and ruin her mane in the rain, but then Rarity dares Applejack to dress up in a frou-frou frilly gown. And both of them do it. And even though there's only been 8 episodes, I remember it really did tickle me to see these two in these situations, because they've just been so well handled as characters that you really, you get a sense that you've known these characters longer than you have. And that's really, really good writing.
So crude. Oh! It is on.
As you might imagine, the two of these girls end up having to share a bed together because comedy, gotta shoehorn in some more. And it does prompt the question, which many fans of the show have asked, if Twilight just has an extra queen-size bed, king-size bed hanging around in the library, why does Spike sleep in a basket? So the two have some really good jokes where they fight over the blanket. There's a moment where Rarity makes the bed beautifully, and then rather than getting in the bed like a normal person, she kind of sachets into the bed under the covers so as not to mess them up. It's such a good moment of comedy because it is based entirely on the character. You couldn't make Applejack or Rainbow Dash, Twilight, Pinkie, or Flutters do that joke and have it work. Same with Applejack jumping in the bed. I can't really imagine Rainbow being that rude on purpose, but I could imagine Applejack doing it. Rainbow Dash, I feel like, would do it, but then kind of be bashful like, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. There really aren't a whole lot of moments in the show when people act out of character. For the most part, these characters are so consistent that you could set your watch by them. Well, at the end, Applejack accidentally causes another tree to fall onto the library, and then Rarity can't seem to help picking it up because she's so worried about the details, getting the books put away and stuff, even though there's a tree in the living room. So they have to kind of overcome their differences and realize Applejack needs to focus more on details and not just the big picture, and that Rarity's, focusing on the details has a place, but Rarity also needs to learn that sometimes she needs to take a step back. Again, I love the idea that, like, a farmer might have more of a big picture idea. Somebody who works in agriculture and understands the chain. Whereas a creative like Rarity, who I can relate to a little bit more because I am a creative, we get so caught up in the little tiny details of a project that sometimes we can miss deadlines and cause major issues for ourselves because we got so stuck on that little thing that didn't matter that we forgot to handle the really important stuff when it was time sensitive. So I thought it was a good lesson overall. What I really just love, again, is the character work. The characters in this show are so good. They are archetypal characters, but there's nothing wrong with an archetype. An archetype is not the same thing as a stereotype, remember? And the way they use these archetypal characters to develop really three-dimensional, lived-in people, you feel like these people could be your friends. And in my case, I feel like a lot of them are my friends. Like, my real-life friends, I see a lot of these things in them. And I think that's part of the brilliance of the show, and even naming it Friendship is Magic, is that you can kind of see your friends in at least one person on this show almost all the time. Like, there's almost always some sort of representation of a different type of person that you're gonna meet in your journey at some point. So this is one of my favorites of season 1. I come back to this one a lot. I love this one. It's kind of a classic of Friendship is Magic. So 10 out of 10 on this one. I love it. Episode 9, Bridal Gossip. This is one of my favorites. I'm not gonna lie, I really enjoy this one. It was one of the first ones where I was like, yeah, you know what? I kind of saw the message coming, and yet it was so cleverly put in, and the reveal of it is so nicely handled that I always thought that, man, this is the sort of quality kids entertainment that young children should be getting, rather than just having a message like this shoved down your throat. Again, the comedy is probably what keeps this from becoming that sort of morality tale that is just very simple and straightforward. So the comedy in this largely comes from the fact that the girls have an allergic reaction to a plant, but we'll get to that in a second. The plot of the episode is that there is a mayor who keeps coming into town, and all of the main 6, minus Twilight, are terrified of her. And the reasons why are pretty funny. Though this person never does anything wrong, she is just different. And because she's different, it scares them. She's actually a zebra rather than a pony. And because they've never seen a zebra, they find her to be very strange. For instance, Rarity passes out at finding out that her stripes, which she thinks are garish, are actually a part of her coat and not a fashion choice. Apple Bloom, Applejack's sister, who we haven't gotten to see a whole lot from yet, but she becomes a big character as we go forward. She has the sort of notion of it's wrong to treat people like this, so I'm going to go out and make friends with Sakura, this zebra, and I'm gonna prove to him that there's actually nothing to be afraid of. She's just a normal pony like all of us. They all think that Sakura kidnapped Apple Bloom because Apple Bloom wanders off with her. But the reason that this even is able to happen is because they're all so distracted being equine racist. Now, there's actually a bit of interesting history behind the character of Sakura. So, Sakura was originally intended to be a Cajun character rather than African. However, when the voice actress was trying out, I saw her at a convention once, and she actually said when she was trying out for the role, they kind of were like, the Cajun thing's not really working. Can you do an African accent? And when she did it, they actually really liked that better. So her audition changed this character. It's kind of an interesting little bit of history behind the production.
I thought of my hairdresser, who's actually from Africa, Clara. Seriously. And she always, when she sees me, she goes, Brenda, how are you? She talks just like this. So I thought, okay, I'm going to remember her. And as I use that accent with a bit of a West Indian, Jamaican/Trinidadian accent, then they asked me to go lower. So my speaking voice is about here, and as I'm doing it, they said lower, and I went, lower. I said, lower. And before you knew it, Sakura sat somewhere like here. Ooh.
the reason that Apple Bloom is able to escape at all and go after Sakura is because the others are having this weird conversation which involves Pinkie singing a song she wrote about how evil Sakura is.
She's an evil enchantress. She does evil dances. And if you look deep in her eyes, she'll put you in trances. So, watch out!
Wow, catchy.
There's also some really good verbal jokes in addition to the song in this scene, where it kind of, in a comedic way, gets across how ridiculous prejudice is. And I'm not somebody who gets super into stories about prejudice unless they are really, like, exploring the causes and the different views and why they feel this way. Things like Guess Who's Coming to Dinner with Sidney Poitier. Fantastic movie for that exact reason. It doesn't just say, these people are racist, herpy derp. It says, like, why they feel this way, their cultural background, their private lives. The black people are as racist as the white people, like the maid who tries to tell him that he's rising above his station. So I find that sort of thing more interesting than just prejudice is bad, ooh, woo. But in this case, I think they handle it through comedy so well, that it's good enough for kids, and for adults watching, it's funny enough that we can accept this plot because, adults honestly do need to learn this lesson about as much as kids in these days, don't they?
Well, I heard that Sakura eats hay.
Pinkie, I eat hay. You eat hay.
I mean, that's really funny, isn't it? They're for goodness sake, they're all horses. They all eat hay. So, that just kind of shows you, like, how ridiculous it is, right? So they go after Apple Bloom, they rescue her, and they walk in through this blue plant. And Sakura clears a bell, says, "Beware, you pony folk. Those leaves of blue are not a joke." And later on, it's like, because of their prejudice or whatever, they don't hear her. And so they think the allergic reaction they're having to this plant is a curse from Sakura, and that whatever she said was the curse. I think if they were going to do that, they should have muffled it more or something, like from a distance, those leaves are blue are not a joke, something just so that we could be a little bit confused as well. But instead, they really drive home that it's the plant. There's a shot where Rainbow Dash flies through the plant and the leaves are all rustling and her wings are flapping the flowers really hard just to drive home to you that it is absolutely the plant and not Sakura causing this. That would have been, I think, better if we actually had come along with them on the journey thinking that it was a curse from Sakura. It gave us a little bit more gray area instead of all black and white, like a zebra. But anyway, their reactions to this plant, it's called Poison Joke, as opposed to Poison Oak. And basically, it causes everybody to have allergic reactions to it, which are inherently funny. It's meant to be like a joke the plant is playing on you, right? And so, Rarity, who's fashion-minded, suddenly she looks like Cousin It. Applejack is all about being big and strong, so she's made into a tiny little, Hasbro toy-sized Applejack. Rainbow Dash prides herself on her flying, so suddenly she can't fly at all. Pinkie Pie never stops talking, so her tongue swells to the point you can't understand a bloody word she's saying. And Fluttershy and Twilight are the two that we really need to focus on because they are the memes from this episode. Twilight's horn, because she values her magic, becomes floppy, and it is 80 kinds of inappropriate. How they got it by the censors, I don't know. But there's literally no joke I could make about it, nothing I could say about it, because everybody has already made every joke about that horn, including in the episode, Spike calls her Twilight Flopple. So I am not going to try to make any jokes about the floppy horn, okay? Because I think we've erected enough monuments to that little meme. Then there's Fluttershy's meme, which is Flutter Guy. her voice, which is, she's known for this timid, soft, shy voice. And suddenly she has this voice of this big, burly man. And it is really funny.
I don't want to talk about it.
And so the jokes that they play off of all of these characters is really funny. I especially love this moment where Pinkie Pie sounds like she says, "Your face is horrible."
Oh, I look horrible. Your face looks horrible.
So they eventually break into Sakura's house, and it's as violent as it sounds. They destroy her home, and eventually they find Apple Bloom was fine. She was helping Sakura make a remedy so that they could all go back to normal. It's a special type of bubble bath which will cure them of their poison joke. This is only after, of course, they hear Sakura chanting a nursery rhyme in her native language, which they mistake as an evil curse or spell that she's putting on this potion, and that she's going to cook Apple Bloom into stew. It leads to possibly my favorite moment. It would be in my top 10 favorite moments of MLP ever, which is the Flutter Guy reprise of Pinkie Pie's song.
She's an evil enchantress, and she does evil dances. And if you look deep in her eyes, she will put you in trances.
Twilight actually is looking for a cure for the poison joke, and there's a book called Supernaturals, which she refuses to read because she's like, it's supernatural, that's ridiculous. No, no reasonable person believes in the supernatural. That's a great little setup for another episode later involving what is called Pinky Sense. You'll understand when we get there, where Twilight is a very skeptically minded person and very scientifically minded. I love that about Twilight, but what is so cool is that little setup comes back. So anyway, turns out the answer to the bubble bath that would cure them was in the Supernaturals book. And it's actually entitled Supernaturals, Natural Remedies That Are Simply Super. She didn't read the subtitle because the title looks so weird, to which Sakura gives us our moral, which is actually really clever because you see where it's going, and yet when they state the moral, it actually has been so cleverly set up that it is kind of like that's kind of brilliant.
Actually, I do have this book, but I didn't look inside because the title was so weird.
Maybe next time you will take a second look and not judge the cover of the book.
That is a good lesson. All kids have to learn that. Don't judge a book by its cover. But rather than just saying that, they illustrate it fabulously through two different visuals within this episode. I gotta say, again, one of my favorites of season 1. It's just such a good episode. The comedy's good, the story's good, the conflict is good, and it sets up Sakura, who is, I think, the most underused character in MLP, possibly, but also she is one of my personal favorites. I love Sakura, and again, I met her voice actress at a con, and she was such a sweet, kind person that it just really... I don't know, it really endeared me to the character all the more knowing that she's the woman behind her and had so much influence on creating her into the character that we know. I also love that Sakura speaks in rhyme, which is a nice little way of giving her a sort of foreign-ism without making her have to speak a whole different language, for instance. So yeah, that was Bridal Gossip. Again, just a great episode. I actually recommend this one as a first episode. Like, if you want to get into MLP, but you're not really sure where to start, and you don't want to watch the whole series in order, this is a good one to start with. Season 1, Episode 10, Swarm of the Century. Now, this is one that seems to be a lot of people's, favorite episode. It's an episode people really love. And although I really do like it, I have one major problem with it. There's a few little things, but there's one major problem that's always aggravated me. But it's an aggravation I have with many television shows and many movies. But let's get into it, and I'll explain as we go. So this episode opens with Fluttershy discovering this new little bug she's never seen before. And she takes one, and as she goes into town, it turns into 3. Somehow they've multiplied exponentially. And Twilight and Rainbow are like, wow, that's really cute. I'll take it off your hands. Pinkie Pie comes in, sees it, and instantly is like, that's a Parasprite. You don't want to deal with those, and runs away. So within the first 5 minutes, we've gotten to my problem. Pinkie is the solution to the problem that this episode will eventually face, okay? And yet, all that has to happen is for Pinkie to just communicate. And it's the failure of communication trope that it's just a bee in my bonnet, okay? It's like, I was watching an episode of Monk recently, and I love the show Monk. I've been rewatching it because my wife's never seen it, and it's a great show. But there's this one moment in the first, I think it's in the first season, where Monk, he's a germaphobe. He's shaking everybody's hands, and the last guy to shake his hand is a black guy, and then he uses a wipe to clean off his hands, right? And the black guy's like, "Oh, man, if you didn't want to shake my hand, like you could have just told me. You didn't have to be rude about it." And they're like, well, he does that with everybody. And the black guy's like, well, he didn't clean his hand after shaking everybody else's hands. And all that has to be said is, I'm sorry that it came across that way, sir. You see, I'm a germaphobe. I was shaking everyone's hand. You were the last one, and so I cleaned my hand. I appreciate that it probably looked bad, but that's just, it's part of my medical condition. I'm OCD. I struggle with germophobia. It's nothing racially against you. That's all that has to be said, right? But instead, Monk and Sharona both go, it's well, you see, and if it's just, I didn't, and you just want it. Whenever that happens in a TV show, I don't know about you, but whenever that happens, I just want to take the character and wring their neck, like, bro, just open your mouth and talk. And it's like, I guess the idea is like they're so shocked at the situation, but it's never a situation that merits that level of shock, is it? It's always something that any normal person would just communicate. Pinkie needs to just say, spoilers, by the way, hey guys, Parasprites love music, especially polka, and if you play polka for them, they will follow you right out into the forest and we can get rid of them. Help me find some instruments. Instead, Pinkie keeps just popping in and being like, I need maracas, somebody help me find maracas, and running away. And then later, when they confront Pinkie and they're like, Pinkie, your nonsense is causing us issues here. We gotta get rid of these pests. Pinkie instead just goes, you think I'm ruining your plans? I'm not the ruiner, I'm the ruinee. Or is that how you would say it? I don't know. And then and all that has to be said is, guys, polka will fix the problem. I appreciate that's a stupid sentence. I'm not sure it would convince them, but at least you would have given the effort to say the sentence. It irritates the crap out of me. So anyway, that's my issue with the episode, okay? From this, it's the trouble with trebles, or Gremlins, okay? In fact, there's even a Gremlins reference where Spike is like, he was hungry, so I fed him last night, and I woke up this morning, they were everywhere. Cute. Very cute. I like a lot of the comedy in this episode, like Princess Celestia is coming to visit Ponyville, right? So this all happens, of course, on the day that she is going to arrive, and they're supposed to be greeting her with this great celebration, and they have this massive pest problem. That's a classic comedic setup. There's some really great little things, like the ponies hanging a banner that says Princess Celeste, and their reason for doing it is ridiculous.
What happened to the rest of her name?
We couldn't fit it all in.
This episode, we get our first time that we see Twilight's issue. She's the element of magic. What could be her issue? She tries to fix everything with magic, to the point that she actually abuses magic. Parasprites have multiplied to the point they're eating all of the food in town. Her solution? I'll cast a spell so that they won't eat food anymore. And then they proceed to eat the town. That's both funny and good character development. speaking of character development, pretty soon we're going to get to an episode where we introduce in full force crazy Twilight. And Twilight going insane is just amazing.
Good! Everyone else, we need to build an exact copy of Ponyville right over there. We've got less than a minute!
Sakura was right. We're doomed.
Immediately, we see Sakura, by the way, getting drawn back into this plot. I mean, we just introduced her an episode ago, but already Twilight goes to her with the Parasprite to identify it. So, it's small, but it's a way we've worked her character back in already. And apparently, Sakura, in the original drafts for the outline for the series, Sakura was going to be a much bigger character, sort of the Obi-Wan character to Twilight. However, the original show was meant to be about 50% continuing adventure storylines, more like Generation 1 My Little Pony. But eventually, for many reasons, which we'll get into in a later episode, it became clear that slice of life episodes were going to be more attainable for the crew and for what they had to work with. And so they contain all of the story-driven elements of the series into the first 2 episodes and the last 2 episodes of every season. Again, with the exclusion of Season 1's ending and Season 3's ending, where they both wrap up in a single episode. But to save the day, Pinkie Pie comes in with her one-mare polka band and leads them all out. But just then, Princess Celestia arrives outside of Ponyville, so she doesn't see all the death and destruction. And they meet her outside of Ponyville. She thinks that the Parasprite's marching away as a parade to celebrate her arriving. Turns out, though, there's a massive pest problem in another city, so she has to leave and can't stay anyway. And we end on a great little stinger.
You saved Ponyville.
Or not.
The lesson learned in this episode is a good lesson. Listen to your friends, hear them out. Sometimes the answer to your problem might be the person that you think is not capable. But if you give them time and you give them, a little bit of a benefit of a doubt, they can sometimes turn out to surprise you. That's a great lesson. Unfortunately, it doesn't stand as tall. Because Pinkie really should have been telling them the solution and then tell her, that's ridiculous. Music's not going to solve the problem. What do you mean, Parasprite? They're animals. They don't believe, something. The conflict should have been clearer to set up that ending. As it is, her friends learn a lesson, but Pinkie doesn't learn her lesson. And she needed to learn a lesson in communication because it's absolutely tantamount to making sure this does not happen again. But whatever, it is just a children's show in the first season. And as it goes along, it would be geared more towards older kids and even adults. But in this first season, it is geared more towards small children. And so it is a good lesson for them to learn. I just think it could have been better written. But I tend to give a pretty steep grading curve to this first season because, again, they did not realize that they were about to tap into a fan base of mostly adults, so they had no way of knowing, and so this is a little bit more child-centric. But that's okay. Again, I don't mind that, and it is a nice antidote to the cynicism of our world. So, overall, a very good episode. You just have to kind of take that one little element, if like me, that communication thing is a thing that bothers you just have to take it with a little grain of salt. Episode 11 of Season 1 of Friendship is Magic. I now get to bless you or curse you, depending on your point of view, with the catchiest song you will ever hear. Winter Wrap-Up. So this episode, basically in a nutshell, is another world-building episode. We haven't got a lot of these so far, so naturally the jokes in this episode are not quite as good as they have been the last several. But that's okay because, again, the world building in this show is so good. And I really like these episodes that are just kind of excuses to build this world and make it more lived in, more believable. So Twilight wakes up at the beginning of the episode. She comes into the situation of winter wrap-up, which is, remember, the ponies have to create all the weather themselves. So this is the end of winter going into spring. And what better time of year to be talking about this episode, huh? So turns out they all have their little jobs that they do. They have to make all of the nests for the birds. The Pegasi have to bust up the clouds and then go fly south and bring the birds back north because the winter's over. The ponies have to go around and wake up all of the animals that are hibernating, which they designate to Fluttershy naturally because she's very gentle. She'll wake them up without panicking them or starting a stampede, for instance. And it's just really great how they thought this out. In fact, Pinkie Pie is actually ice skating on the lake because she is scoring the ice so that when the ice melts, it will break into big cubes and melt faster. That's really cool. Like, that's a brilliant little bit of world building. I never would have thought of that. But it's such a neat little bit to just throw at you. And no kid would ever think about the logistics of that. So it is quite cool. And Twilight is trying to get a handle on the 3 teams, because there's 3 different teams: the agricultural teams, the animal teams, and the Pegasi team doing their thing. And Ponyville has this weird little tradition: no magic. You can't use magic to wrap up winter in Ponyville. There is an issue with this, but we'll come to it in a second. So Twilight watches them do their jobs, and of course, the ponies all break into a big song and dance number, Winter Wrap-Up.
Winter wrap, let's finish our holiday cheer. Winter wrap, 'cause tomorrow's spring is
This song is so catchy, and it stays in my head this time of year because as winter leaves and spring arrives, all I can do is walk around singing this dang song. So, there you go. I had to suffer, now you have to suffer. I'm hoping it's like the Ring videotape. If I pass the curse on to you, maybe it will leave me alone, because it's been stuck in my head for 11 years. Oh, almost 12 years, actually. Oh my gosh, it's just, it's so much. So anyway, that being said, Twilight tries her hand at everything. She messes up the nests and sends Rarity into a tizzy because Rarity apparently has OCD now. And she tries to help Fluttershy, but she gets sprayed by skunks. Then she tries to help Applejack, and Spike puts a little bug in her ear and is like, hey, you should just do magic. Nobody's ever going to know. So she does it. And she literally plows, because she's driving a plows into everybody and causes like a mini avalanche, which destroys a lot of the progress they'd already made, because the Earth ponies have to go around clearing the snow so that they can plant the new seeds. So this leads Applejack to basically, in a really nice way, actually, she's really not that mean about it, but she's like, Twilight, we don't use magic. That's the tradition. That's what we do in this town. That's how we do things, and you especially can't come onto my farm and come doing it without my permission. It's not right. You're breaking our tradition, and you're doing it on in my house. So Twilight's brokenhearted. She runs away. Let's talk about the problem with this episode. Okay, it's an unintended consequence, sort of like the episode with Trixie, Ghostbusters, that we talked about before, how it has some unintended little moments that come across as quite dark. This episode, in and of itself, and everything prior to it, does not cause that. There's nothing in the logic of the episode itself that would cause you to think there's anything wrong. There's a problem, however, when you've watched the whole series. Because at this stage, I think that it was meant to be like, genetically, because the Earth ponies have to do everything without magic, they're stronger. So they can kick the trees and drop the apples. They can move these heavy plows, right? But then on the other hand, you have Pegasi, and the Pegasi have wings. They're like birds, right? So their wings give them lift. It's just a basic scientific logic to it, right? They have wings, ergo they fly. Not to be confused with the chicken, who has that same issue, but not the same result. Anyway, so it seems like unicorns are the only ones with magic, right? Wrong. Because when you watch the rest of the series, you very quickly realize the Earth pony's super strength and their ability to be so good with plants, that is magic. The Pegasi's ability to fly, that is also magic. In fact, a later episode with a villain named Tyrek proves that the magic can be sucked out of them. And when that happens, Earth ponies become weak and the Pegasi can't fly. Which means they are all using their magic. The unicorns are the only ones not allowed to use their specific, race-specific magic. And when you know that, it does make you think, ooh, that's really unfortunate. Because it does seem kind of like they're being racist against the unicorns. That is not what they're doing. Nobody was sitting in the control room like, ooh, I want to be racist against the unicorns. That wasn't happening. It was just an unintended problem with Lauren Faust, the creator of this new generation of My Little Pony, left the show in season 3. The Tyrek episode happened in season 4, and so they started expanding the magic and the world without Lauren's original design always being consulted. I would guess that she had a hard and fast rule that the magic of the ponies was solely in the unicorns and alicorns. That being said, making all of them have some type of magic is a way better idea. It's one of the few times I'll say, absolutely, if that was Lauren's original design, the showrunners did make a good choice by going in a different direction. Because it makes way more sense for magic to just be kind of like the force of this universe. Like from Star Wars. And that everybody has some, and it kind of moves and flows through all living beings. That's way more consistent with what we see. But I did want to acknowledge that because if you've watched the whole series and you come back to it, you might not think about the fact that these showrunners did start expanding the lore in ways that contradict earlier episodes. And in this case, it's in a way that makes an earlier episode come across with a message that was completely unintended. Now, something that was intended, and I think actually does create a problem, and we talked about this a little bit before. Spike, the writers of the show said that there just wasn't really room for Spike because they were already writing for 6 very diverse characters with very different points of view and different ways of life. And so they didn't really know what to do with Spike. And so early on, Spike becomes the butt of a joke where he's constantly having things happen to him, and not only we, the audience, but the other ponies kind of are like, ha ha ha, isn't it funny? Spike is being abused. Doesn't really work. And in this episode, it's sort of like that, where Spike is completely, in this case, actually genuinely useless to this plot because he can't do anything. Like, there's literally nothing for him to do. He wants to stay home and nap, and Twilight won't let him. At the end of the episode, he ends up catching a cold, and it's almost like meant to be funny. Like, oh, didn't Spike deserve that? Not really. He just wanted to go home and take a nap and not be dragged all over creation, witnessing events that he actually cannot be involved in. So that was a little bit of a problem for me. But in the end, Twilight actually does find her place without using magic in being an organizer. She becomes the town organizer, organizing the entire shot for every time I say that word, organizing the entire winter wrap-up so that they can finish on time and bring in winter on schedule for the first time ever. Later on, there's a little throwaway joke with a pony named Amethyst Star, who claims she was the town organizer before Twilight came along, which makes me wonder what she was doing during this winter wrap-up or any of the prior winter wrap-ups. But overall, by and large, I really like the episode. Again, it's not the best in terms of comedy or character development, but the world building is fantastic. And sometimes a world building episode is just fine by me. Episode 12. Call of the Cutie. Now we're getting into what I promised in an earlier episode we would be seeing. Apple Bloom, Applejack's sister, becoming sort of one of the main characters. I mentioned that in Thinking Bridal Gossip because we hadn't really seen much of Apple Bloom, but now we start to get her fully coming into her own as the character that we would eventually learn to know and love. And this is a good outing, a good first outing for Apple Bloom. as a solo episode. The episode opens with Apple Bloom in school at Pokey Kindergarten. I'm just kidding. It's not Pokey Kindergarten, but it may as well be, because you can really tell that Lauren Faust, who was married to Craig McCracken, the guy who created the Powerpuff Girls, you could really tell that she based the Cutie Mark Crusaders on the Powerpuff Girls to some degree, and I think she actually did say something along those lines at one point. And Apple Bloom, of course, right down to the red hair and the big pink bow. It's very Blossom from Powerpuff Girls. But it opens up in the school, and Cheerilee, the teacher, who takes her name from a Gen 3 pony, she is teaching the class about cutie marks. Now we finally get some lore about the butt tattoos. Why do these ponies have butt tattoos? What is it? What is the meaning behind it? Why do the elements of harmony? Why are they, become shaped like the cutie mark? Is it just so that they can sell more toys? Probably, but there is a good in series reason why. So basically, a cutie mark is described in this first episode about the subject as being the thing that makes you special. It is basically an imprinting of your special talent. So, we've talked about before, Twilight's special talent is magic. Her symbol is a runic symbol for magic. And we see her cutie mark pop up later on the actual, well, I don't want to spoil too much, but the thing that gives them the elements of harmony actually has Twilight's cutie mark on it. Now, this is because as we go forward, we'll see that cutie marks are also connected to destiny. In this universe, there is actually some things that, whether they're predetermined to happen or fated, however you want to phrase it, in this first episode, they keep the lore very simple, which is just that it's your special talent. It's what you were meant to do. So already we do have some of that destiny creeping in, but later on, we'll find out that there are some things in this universe that are actually, like, major events fated to happen. And in fact, Princess Celestia, we find out, even gets psychic visions at times, which is intriguing. It's a nice little element to add to her as a leader as well. But I'm getting way off in the weeds of the lore, and literally we're in the first minute of this episode. So Cheerilee describes to them how, eventually it's sort of like pony puberty. You get to a certain age, you realize what you're supposed to do, and bam, cutie mark appears. And that's how you know. So, going forward, we see that there are these two bullies in the class, and I think this is the first episode we meet them, Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon. Silver Spoon is kind of a yes man to Diamond Tiara, or yes woman, and basically, Diamond Tiara makes fun of and berates Apple Bloom and another character named Twist for not having their cutie marks yet. They are blank flanks, which I love that little name. I think it's so funny. And another little bit of world building is Diamond Tiara just got her cutie mark, which is why she's making fun of the others. And she invites the whole class to her quinceañera. I'm a sucker for puns, okay? And I just can't help it. I love that. So Apple Bloom is super nervous about going to this quinceañera, and she goes off trying to get some help. I've got to find my cutie mark by the end of the day, because otherwise I'm going to be the only person at this party that doesn't have their cutie mark. She talks to Applejack, and Applejack's like, me, Big Macintosh, and Granny Smith were all the last in our class to get our cutie marks too. Maybe it runs in the family. So that's not exactly a comfort to her.
There'll be 4 bits.
I didn't put those in my bag.
Likely story. 4 bits, lady.
Right after a commercial break, Rainbow Dash finds Apple Bloom moping, and she gives this little joke.
Looks like some pony's got a dark cloud hanging over her head. Let me do something about that.
So Rainbow Dash tries to help her get her cutie mark by trying a bunch of different things, and Apple Bloom is pretty terrible at all of them. Then Pinkie Pie helps her out by seeing if she can bake. Maybe her special talent is baking, which leads to Pinkie singing this song called Cupcakes, which probably was the origin for a creepypasta, which became like the first grimdark, or one of the first grimdark fan fictions in My Little Pony history. I won't get into that. There's tons of videos about that, but basically it's a one of those fics where a character is actually a psycho and they end up killing their friends and that sort of thing. It's kind of iconic in the pony fandom. It's really poorly written. I mean, it kind of sucks, but it was very important at the time for kind of breaking that barrier into making a really adult content pony fic. So again, it's terribly poorly written, but it still holds kind of a special place in the fandom for that reason. Also, there's a little bit where Twilight tries to give Apple a cutie mark by magic, and this is when we learn that cutie mark magic works differently than regular unicorn magic. Now, this is important because later on in seasons 5 and 6, we will see a pony who successfully can, in fact, mess with cutie mark magic and actually can do things like remove or give a cutie mark. We would never have built up to that point to where the magic of these specific marks would become so indelibly imprinted into our pony fandom brains that by the time they start expounding on it, it really does feel like some real open frontier that needed exploring, and they give us some pretty satisfying answers and a lot of new questions. But this episode, man, this is a hard one for me. I'm getting distracted on everything. It's funny, this episode actually seems to be kind of connected to a lot of other things, and until I sat down literally right now to talk about it, I never really thought about it before, but this episode kind of is super important. So anyway, Apple Bloom walks out of the kitchen and into Sugar Cube Corner, and oh no, the quinceañera is there in full swing. Convenient, sometimes you just forget that a party is going on, the very party you were dreading. So she's there, she tries to hide her cutie mark, and embarrasses herself terribly, and everybody's laughing at her. Diamond Tiara is making fun of her. There's this weird little moment where several of the kids start chanting like they're in a cult, just going blank, 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 blank. It's like 2 seconds, but it's wildly scary. That's when we meet Scootaloo and Sweetie Belle. I love these guys. They are so cute. And they stand up to Diamond Tiara to defend Apple Bloom. So right off the bat, from this first meeting of Scootaloo and Sweetie Belle, the first time we meet them, we already like them. We already see that these are two people with some integrity. They'll stand up to the bully. They'll defend their friend, even though she's not really their friend yet. And they show that they are also blank flanks. They do not have their cutie marks. And the three of them become fast friends. Even trying to come up... There's a funny little scene where they're trying to come up with a name for their friend group, which they eventually settle on the Cutie Mark Crusaders. And thus a legend of ponydom was born. And this is quite a cute little episode. And again, it seems like wildly important the more I think about it. Like, there's a ton of stuff that actually this episode kind of established and worked into. So, the moral of this episode. Sometimes the thing that you think is going to keep you from making friends can be your greatest asset in making them, and sometimes it's the very thing that makes you special. So in this last 30 seconds or so, it really turns around and says, actually, not only do they not need this mark to be special, but the very fact that they don't have it yet, that they have all this potential and life ahead of them, that actually is something that makes them special. That's a really neat lesson for kids. And it closes on a shot of Princess Celestia reading Twilight's letter to her, and Celestia looking down at her own cutie mark. And that also raises some good questions, like Celestia's special talent is raising the sun. Crazy. And what does that say about the magic of this system? And of course, more questions about the lore. Who was raising and lowering the sun and moon before Celestia? Which we'll get into in the Christmas episode. Hello, everybody, or should I say, every pony. I'm the Rambling Director, and today we're talking about Season 1, Episode 13 of Friendship is Magic. We finally did it. We have made it to the halfway mark of the first season, not of the series. It'll take a long time to get to that point. But this one is called Fall Weather Friends, and it is one of the first episodes where I fully put in my chips and said, yeah, I'm a fan of this show, and I could not imagine not finishing the series after this. So, as we talked about before, that was quite a long time ago. I think it was like 2012 when I first started watching the show, and I probably got to this episode in about one day of watching, and I was hooked. I loved it. I don't binge watch series, but this, I think, if I'm remembering right, was the last episode of the day, the first day that I watched Friendship is Magic. I really love this one. Applejack is one of my favorites. I think I've said that Applejack and Rarity are both my favorites, and I'd say probably it is a tie between those two. I love them so much. But this one is specifically Ashley Ball versus Ashley Ball. She voices both Applejack and Rainbow Dash. This one, they are doing an Iron Pony competition between Dashie and AJ, and it is a really good episode to see the dynamic between these two, because I talked about with some other episodes where we first start to kind of see, like Griffin the Brush Off, Pinky and Dashie, how they really connect and become close friends, as opposed to just acquaintances. And this shows kind of the dynamic between AJ and Dashie, because these two are very headstrong, very stubborn. Dashie certainly is very full of herself, whereas Applejack has kind of just this pride that she's earned. Like, she really has earned the right to be proud, and she doesn't relinquish that very easily, and she does not appreciate it being challenged. So in this episode, we see the two of them kind of butting heads. They're challenging each other to all of these sporting events to see who is, in fact, the strongest pony. There is some, like the rest of the episodes, there's some really good humor in this episode. Starting off with a little joke where Dashie keeps interrupting Applejack.
So you two are doing what now? An Iron Pony competition. See, we've set up a bunch of events to decide which one of us is the most athletic pony ever.
Throughout this, as the challenges get harder, and we see some challenges are more favorable to the super strong Earth pony, Applejack, and some are easier for a Pegasus pony with wings, obviously, such as Rainbow Dash. And so they both have their strengths and weaknesses, and they are neck and neck this entire competition. What I really like to see in this is that Rainbow Dash starts to get kind of nervous that Applejack could actually beat her. And that is something that Rainbow Dash's vanity simply cannot allow. She can't let somebody be better than her. It's unthinkable. On the other hand, although AJ is a very proud person, we also see that AJ is super supportive of Rainbow, even telling her, hey, don't be nervous. It is just a friendly game after all. In the end, this doesn't matter. We're still friends, and we're just having fun. But that is clearly not the way Rainbow Dash sees it. And slowly throughout the challenges, we see Rainbow starts to cheat. We've seen that their elements are not always things that are easy for them. So Rainbow Dash is the element of loyalty. She actually finds loyalty a really difficult thing to embody. So in this case, it's not enough for her to simply allow somebody else to be better than her. In her effort to be the best at everything, she actually feels the need to cheat. And seeing her cheat, cheating in a very blasé way. She's not exactly hiding what she's doing either. And she's clearly embarrassed that she's doing it, but she's doing it anyway because she simply just cannot accept the hit to her ego that it would mean to realize that Applejack is better at some things than she is. We get to the final challenge of the Iron Pony competition, which is a tug-of-war contest, and Rainbow just flies up in the air, which, I mean, my gosh, like that, I mean, there's just no ability, like there's no plausible deniability to pretend that's not cheating. And Applejack, after being a really way too good of a sport and letting too much of the slide, finally says, you're cheating, this was not fair, and now you're rubbing my face in it. they decide that they're going to have one final competition. This one, no wings allowed. They're going to run the Running of the Leaves together. Now, the Running of the Leaves is an excellent bit of world building, but it's world building that is not shoved down your throat. It's really just in the final half or so of the episode, and they just kind of touch on it. We don't get a really in-depth conversation or description in the way we did with Winter Wrap-Up about this tradition or process or why it's necessary. So, just briefly, basically all the ponies have to run through the woods, and the wind stream of them running will rip the leaves down for the autumn to come in. Remember, the ponies do control all weather, right down to the sun and moon raising and lowering. So, it's very interesting to see how even something as simple as the fall leaves is all a process of their, I guess, interference.
These two ponies have a bit of a grudge match they're trying to settle.
Yes, and grudge rhymes with fudge.
Yes, it does.
What? And I like fudge, but if you eat too much fudge, I get a pudge and then I can't fudge.
So Rainbow and Applejack run this race together. They treat it like a race. Pretty much nobody else seems to really be doing that. And Twilight comes in and is like, I'm going to run the race too. And they're like, have you ever ran a race before? And she's like, nope, but I read a book about it. And everybody's laughing. And I was really impressed the first time I saw this episode because I really expected Twilight to come in first and be like, because that's sort of the kids show stereotype, I guess, for this sort of trope would be that she would end up being the one who wins the race. But she doesn't. She places, and she places quite low, but she's like, I don't think it's too bad for the first time running a race. I mean, I've never done it before. I like that. I think that's clever. You know what else is cool? Twilight's number in the race is 42. The answer to life, the universe, everything. There's no way that was accidental. So throughout the race, Applejack and Rainbow keep kind of tripping themselves because they're so preoccupied with the other person, and then they blame the other person even though they actually are kind of sabotaging themselves. But they both buy into this until they start actually sabotaging each other. And in the end, they both tie for dead last. The message in this one is really good, not just for kids, but for adults. It's kind of a timeless classic lesson in the way the Sakura episode was. But I really like the way it was handled in this because you kind of get where the animosity is coming from. Rainbow has this deep-seated fear of failure that causes her to do this awful thing and cheat, and belittle her friend. On the other hand, Applejack really needed... she's such a good, has such good sportsmanship. She needed to speak up for herself and not just allow herself to be walked all over. So then at the end of the episode, when we see, like, in the end, these sort of friendly competitions, they have to be put in check. In other words, if you can't play the game without cheating, if you can't play the game without it devolving into something that ruins the friendship the game was based on, then just don't play. And I kind of like that lesson. I also like Twilight's little mini lesson about pacing yourself during a race. That's honestly, it's kind of a fun way of working in that sort of tortoise and the hare sort of thing, where AJ and RD are kind of a hare character, and Twilight is sort of the tortoise in this situation. It's kind of working in an Aesop fable without shoving it in your face. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into that, but anyway, I did really like this episode, and looking back on it now, yeah, again, I realized that this was a big one for me in terms of like the stepping stone of just saying, yeah, I'm a fan. Unabashedly, unashamedly, I am a fan of this show. In fact, that very evening, upon finishing this episode, I ended up going out. I'm pretty sure it was this episode, like I said, 99%. I ended up going to Walmart that night, and I bought my first piece of merchandise from the show, which was this little piggy bank of Rainbow Dash. So, yeah, if that tells you anything about what a nerd I am, yeah, to see how a friendship like theirs could survive this, with there being such abrasive personalities rubbing up against each other all the time, and yet come out loving each other in the end, and still respecting that friendship more than their own pride. I found that really good lesson for kids. Season 1, Episode 14, Suited for Success. Now, this is one of my favorite episodes. It'd probably be in my top 10. I really love this. I've said repeatedly, in fact, I said in the very last episode, that Applejack and Rarity kind of tie for my favorite character in the series. And this is like such peak Rarity episode. So, Rarity is making dresses, doing her thing, running her fashion business, and all of her friends, it's almost like a curtain call, they all come by and casually drop the fact that they do not have a dress for the Grand Galloping Gala. Remember, we mentioned that in episode 3, Ticketmaster, and how that was going to build up and eventually become a big deal as we approach the end of season 1. Well, here it is. We're actually getting some more build up for it. We got to have dresses for the gala because this is a show for little girls, and every so often they have to remind you of that. However, one of the wonderful things that they do in this show is Hasbro would often hand them down mandates. You have to do this or that. So there's probably a mandate that they had to have some sort of ball so that they could have fancy princess dresses for all of their toys. Now, within that, apparently they had a lot of free reign, and this kind of shows through this episode, and I'll get into that more. So Rarity decides, I'm going to make a dress, a brand new original dress, to match each of your personalities and your mane and coat colors.
You absolutely must wear formal attire.
Nah.
And we're going to do it all within this incredibly tight time frame, because there's just no time, even though the Grand Galloping Gala doesn't happen for another, 13 episodes after this. And that's when we get an introduction to Daniel Ingram's incredible ability to compose great music for this show. I know there are some fans, apparently, who really don't like the music in this show. Since the music is such a big part, I kind of question how, but I love the music in this show. Winter Wrap-Up is an earworm, admittedly, and it's an annoying earworm. It stays stuck in my head through all of the months of spring. Starting from Art of the Dress and working our way forward, I can think of maybe 2 songs in the whole series, maybe 3, that are really underwhelming. Everything else feels like you could take the music and make a fantastic musical out of it. It's pretty high quality. And I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that Daniel Ingram clearly loves a lot of great composers, and this is our first intro to that, because this song is based on a song from Sunday in the Park with George. Just listen and tell me you can't hear how clearly one was an homage to the other.
Bit by bit, putting it together.
Thread by thread, stitching it together.
Every moment makes a contribution. Every little detail plays a part.
Cutting out the pattern snip by snip, making sure the fabric falls nicely.
Having just the vision's no solution. Everything depends on execution.
Always got to keep in mind my pacing, making sure the clothes correctly facing.
Now, obviously, this is a really cool little joke for any adults watching, and so I caught that the first time I watched it, and I was like, wow, I can't believe they referenced something like that in a kid's show. But it seems to be a motif that songs that have to do with the gala are based on Sondheim musicals, because later we get an homage to Into the Woods, again, focusing entirely around the gala. So Rarity makes 6 stunning dresses, and her friends don't like the dresses. That was kind of a nice little subversion of your expectation, because you kind of have an idea of where this is going based on the kids' shows you've seen in the past, and then when they turn around and all the friends are just really brutally honest and like, yeah, I don't like it.
And we're plumb grateful because you worked so hard on them.
Mine's just not as cool as I was imagining.
That's actually a nice, refreshing change of pace. Then we get a reprise of Art of the Dress, where Rarity makes dresses exactly to their specification, and they are the most horrendous pieces of garbage you've ever seen. But they're really funny pieces of garbage. They have a little fashion show, and all of the girls kind of have this moment of realization like, oh, we made a mistake. And now that everybody is looking at us, it's really clear that we should have just let the fashion designer make us something fashionable.
You think we overdid it?
Nah. Okay, maybe a little.
Now, this is really quite hard on Rarity because hoity-toity, one of the big wigs of the fashion world, happens to be invited, and he comes and he sees these ugly dresses and determines that Rarity might be like the worst designer who ever lived. Which is valid after seeing that, if that's the only exposure you have. So, Rarity is terribly depressed, and it leads to some of the funniest lines on the whole show. It is the reason I say this is one of my favorite episodes, is just how funny it is. Taking away the fact that the music is really good. And there's also, of course, the iconic meme.
The shape's fine, just make the whole thing, cooler. It needs to be about 20% cooler.
But as I was saying, Rarity is always the most funny of the ponies. I mean, Rarity is the only one of these characters that I don't think they've ever made a joke with her that I've not laughed at. And some of them I laugh hard. And it just, so much of it is down to Tabitha St. Germain's incredible line delivery.
I used to be some pony. I used to be respected. I made dresses, beautiful, beautiful dresses. Do ponies wallow in pity? Oh, listen to me. I don't even know what I'm supposed to wallow in. I'm so pathetic.
So in a great little payoff of something that seems like a throwaway joke, Fluttershy turns out to actually be a great seamstress, and she sews Rarity's gala dress together exactly the way she wanted it, so her friends made her the dress of her dreams. Isn't that nice? Kids show, happy ending, right?
Oh, I forgive you.
Well, that's mighty big of you.
But my whole career is still ruined.
Oh, right.
To this day, I've seen this episode like a million times, and that still cracks me up. Let's watch it again.
Well, that's mighty big of you.
But my whole career is still ruined.
Oh, right.
I'm telling you, it's Tabitha St. Germain's line delivery. It makes Rarity's character. So anyway, they invite Hoity-Toity back, which, aside from being one of the best pony names, is really hard to say. He comes, and they introduce him to all of the beautiful dresses she had originally made, and of course he's super impressed because they are actually gorgeous dresses. Like, in terms of just, like, cartoons, they might be the coolest dresses I've ever seen, and there's a second Grand Galloping Gala later in the series, and the dresses are not nearly as impressive. I mean, they really put in some hard work to design some beautiful dresses for this episode. So Rarity's reputation is saved, and her friends learn a valuable lesson. They act like the lesson is, don't look a gift horse in the mouth, which, okay, in this universe, surely should be racist, but they act like that's the lesson. Like, if somebody's willing to do something nice for you, don't be too picky, and to be sure, you can get that lesson out of this. But I actually think that there's also a lesson to be learned about trusting the expertise of your friends and acknowledging that they might just know better than you sometimes. Which is a hard lesson for anybody to learn. I appreciate that. But it's an important one if you want to live any kind of good life. There's also a line in the song where the girls tell Rarity to make sure that she stays within their budget, which means that even if they're not paying Rarity for her labor, they are paying for all of the materials, which does kind of confuse the lesson if the lesson is supposed to be don't look a gift horse in the mouth. I mean, yes, she's gifting them with her time, but clearly they are paying for the materials, at the very least. So, yeah, I really just feel like the message should have been more about trusting your friends with their expertise level, rather than trying to make it about gifts, which, again, this, whether or not this is technically a gift is actually kind of confused. So I actually think they should have focused more on that. However, it's a perfectly serviceable lesson for kids. episode 15 of Friendship is Magic, Feeling Pinky Keen. I really love the message of this one, so I'm going to keep the review kind of short today because I mainly want to talk about the message. I always mention the comedy, and the comedy is really good in this episode. I mean, there's some great moments like Twilight literally getting up on her soapbox, and just overall, any episode where Twilight is becoming a little unhinged is an episode that pretty much automatically I'm going to love. But this one just has such a unique message in the entire range of children's shows that I've seen over the years. I don't think I've ever seen one with this message, but it's actually such a good message that I just really want to highlight it here. Pinkie Pie at the beginning starts exhibiting this sense, her pinky sense. She kind of knows when things are about to happen and can predict them and tell people to take caution against the things she senses. Twilight starts off as a genuine skeptic, but as her worldview is challenged more and more with the indisputable fact of what she sees with her own eyes, she slowly becomes irrational, and to the point where she is what I and many other people on the internet would say, playing a skeptic. She's one of those people who is endlessly being confronted with evidence, but she's just claiming, I can't believe that because I've seen no evidence, and, playing skeptic, just acting like, oh no, this isn't happening. Nope, not my lion eyes are deceiving me. That sort of person. It is a great cautionary tale for children and adults. Increasingly, adults need a cautionary tale about this, against being someone who is ideologically possessed by your predisposed notions about the world, to the point where you're just unwilling to believe any evidence to the contrary of what you've already determined to be true. This episode takes Twilight through a real odyssey in her character, going from true skeptic to someone who's ideologically possessed to the point that she just cannot acknowledge anything else, putting herself in an echo chamber, all the way to being completely broken down by the reality of something that she cannot explain. Now, I know if this video picks up any traction, there will be people who will not like what I'm saying. They will not like the message of this episode, and they will think that it's bullcrap. I would just say, and just caution you, to take the message of the episode to heart in at least one respect. I'm willing to bet that if this video picks up any traction, that a lot of you guys already have something in mind that you think I'm talking about. Yet I've not said anything about any religion or any political ideology up to this point in the video. So that just goes to show you all the more. All the things that we just are predisposed to see because we look for them. So that's another thing I just love about this episode. Now, you do sometimes get Christmas movies or Christmas specials, which, let's be honest, are generally geared more towards a religious audience. And they will sometimes, when talking about fictional characters like Santa Claus, allow themselves to have the message that you just have to believe. But very rarely will you see it in a more secular setting, in a widespread mainstream children's show like My Little Pony. This episode just outright says, and I've complained that some of the lessons in the past don't quite line up with what the episode is really teaching, but this one totally does. It's a totally believable journey from skeptic to believer. And the message as stated is perfect. There are beautiful things in this world that you cannot explain. You just have to choose to believe in them. And sometimes it takes a good friend to show you the way. Again, I have not said anything about you should believe X or you should acknowledge Y. I've not stated any of that. I just think it's a really good message because materialism is as ridiculous an idea as Gnosticism, which is the opposite. Materialism is that there's nothing but matter and nothing else matters. And on the other hand, you have something like Gnosticism, which teaches that the spiritual realm matters and the physical world is evil. Both of those ideas are ridiculous. But then you have somewhere in between this very smart lesson that we're being presented with in this episode that this world is important, and science and skepticism is important. But at the end of the day, although correlation doesn't equal causation, repeated correlation generally is a pattern. It means something's going on. A lot of people complain that we never see the pinky sense in action before this episode, but then we see it like 30 times within the episode. But that's crucially important, because we have to set up that this happens enough to establish a pattern. Twilight is correct to be a skeptic when she sees it once or twice, but by the time it's happened 50 times in front of her own eyes, then it becomes irrational to be a skeptic. And your experiential involvement, your own witnessing of these things, that is a logical, rational reason to believe in them. I just love the setup of this episode. I love the way it gets across this message. And again, I just love the message of it. It's so mature, and it's in a show about cartoon horses. So really and truly might be my favorite lesson in the whole series. And of course, after season 4, they kind of more or less give up on having lessons stated at the end of the episodes. But this really was like a quintessential episode to me, in terms of like an episode that every kid should see, because that's what we try to teach kids, is there are beautiful things in this world that, it's not necessarily quantifiable. It's not necessarily a scientific reality, but you should believe in them anyway. We teach kids that, and then the minute you get into your teenage years, we start pounding kids and adults over the head with, you're stupid if you believe anything you can't see. Well, personally, I think it's a much more mature lesson to say there are things like truth, goodness, beauty, and love that we can't ground. There's nothing to ground them on. There's no foundation to rest them on, except metaphysical reality that you just have to choose to believe. I know this is really just a coffee-fueled sermon from a guy in a My Little Pony shirt, but take it for what it's worth. I think it's a great lesson. And more adults should also be kind of giving it at least a chance, because there are realities that are just beautiful, good, true realities that rest on the fact you just have to believe them, like morality. Season 1, Episode 16 of Friendship is Magic. This one is Sonic Rainboom, and it's kind of funny that they put this episode in the order that they did, and I actually think it should have come a few episodes later in the series than it did. This episode is all Rainbow Dash preparing and competing in the Young Flyers competition. This is her chance to be noticed by the Wonderbolts, which is kind of her whole character in Season 1. It gets better, and of course, eventually she does work towards that goal of being a real Wonderbolt. The Wonderbolts, by the way, I don't know if I've talked about this, but they are based on the Blue Angels. They're an elite flying team. They're kind of like the Air Force in this universe. This episode also gave birth to another famous pony meme. It's Fluttershy going,
Yay.
People love this, and to tell you the truth, I never fully understood why. It's cute, it's funny, but I guess it's more the fact that it is such a memeable, quotable little thing. I mean, I myself do this whenever something good happens for one of my friends. I go, yay. So, I mean, I suppose it's just the meminess of it. It's not really that funny in its context, though, so it's kind of funny that it became popular at all. Something I think is far funnier is when Twilight says, "What are you two arguing about?" And Fluttershy says,
Were we arguing? I'm sorry.
Fluttershy is Canadian. It's also really crazy that Rainbow Dash, like a part of her character in Season 1 that we see through this episode, is her willingness to blame her friends rather than accept the blame herself. So the fact that she can't, I guess because of performance anxiety, cannot achieve the Sonic Rainboom, which is the move she's trying to pull off to win the Best Young Flyers competition, She puts all the blame on Fluttershy's inability to cheer loudly, which is just wild, but it's also fitting in that characterization that we've talked about in almost every episode of this show, where the elements of harmony are elements of things that they actually struggle with. So when Rainbow Dash is loyal, there's nobody more loyal, but loyalty is something she struggles with. There's also an indication in a later episode that the sonic rain boom was something known about, but it was thought to be a myth until Rainbow Dash pulled it off. So that's why she's so eager to do it again, to prove that it wasn't just a fluke, that this is actually something that she is skilled enough to do on purpose. Now we get another great little bit of world building. Cloudsdale, great name by the way, is a city built on the clouds just for Pegasi, which means earth ponies and unicorns cannot walk there. The magic of Pegasi includes the ability to walk on clouds as if they're solid. But the other ponies don't have that magic. A great bit of world building. So Twilight has to come up with a spell. First, she thinks to give the ponies wings, which she performs on Rarity, giving Rarity these beautiful butterfly wings that are very fitting to her personality. When it turns out that the spell is too complicated to do on all of them, she simply casts a spell on them that gives them the ability to walk on clouds without the ability to fly. This is another subtle bit of world building because that indicates that the ability to walk on clouds is something that all winged creatures naturally inherit. Like there's sort of a magic to having wings that gives you that ability, which is an interesting little piece of equestrian lore. Now, a nice subtle bit of animation is actually that when Twilight casts the spell on Rarity, she's wrapped up in a cocoon and then comes out as a butterfly. That's a really neat little detail that you could actually miss. Another Fluttershy moment that I think is way funnier than the yay is when she tries to be assertive.
Wait just a minute. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm trying to be more assertive. Then show up at the Cloudaseum and see for yourself. If you're free.
It's also funny to see Rainbow Dash getting bullied by these guys who keep calling her Rainbow Crash. What's doubly odd is that these guys were actually present when she did the Sonic Rain Boom the first time. That's a little bit of a plot hole in a later episode. Now, I've said repeatedly that Rarity is like my favorite character, tied with Applejack, and she is always the funniest part. I think in part that's because Tabitha St. Germain, her voice actor, was allowed to improvise a lot, and she is just hysterical. This is another strength of these characters, is that each one of these characters is so specific, and they have plots and elements that only work for their characters. So Rarity is the person who would get so full of herself because of these beautiful wings that she would think everybody needed to look at her and glorify her because she's so beautiful. You couldn't imagine Applejack or Rainbow Dash or Pinkie Pie or Fluttershy or Twilight doing that. And that is exactly what she does. Rarity becomes so full of herself because of the beauty of her butterfly wings that she wants everybody to see them, and eventually enters the Best Young Flyers competition herself, competing against Rainbow just because of her beautiful wings. So I guess the Cloudsdale judges are just super progressive, because it doesn't matter if you're a real Pegasus or not, you can just grow wings and compete. Rarity also seems to cause a lot of trouble, like when she destroys the snowflake factory, basically, and doesn't even seem to be that aware she's doing it. So during the Best Young Flyers competition, Rainbow is so nervous that she keeps swapping out her number with other people so that she basically ends up going last. Rarity also takes so long to do her makeup and put on a beautiful costume that accentuates her wings that they both end up having to go last at the same time. During this, Rarity flies up into the air, and the rays from the sun refract through the wings and burn them up. Yeah, that's right. It's an Icarus reference. In a show made for like 7 to 10-year-olds. That's why I say, this show is so much better than it had any right to be. It's no wonder that it caught on with older audiences, because there's no way any 7-year-old is going to know what they're referencing in this. Rainbow Dash has been having a terrible time and basically screwing up everything in her routine. However, when she sees Rarity falling to her doom, she immediately leaps into action. Now the Wonderbolts also try to save her. So, good point for the Wonderbolts for actually doing something. It's one of the few times in the series they even try to do something. Typically they stand around mouth agape while Rainbow Dash fixes the problem. But in this, they actually try. Unfortunately, they get their butts handed to them in mid-air by Rarity by accident. It's sort of like saving a person when they're drowning, you know, how they'll probably drown you as a result. I guess it's like that, but honestly, it just comes across like the world's most elite flying team are a bunch of idiots. It's a problem that not only I, but a lot of members of the fandom have had with the Wonderbolts and with the Princess's guards. You see, these are kind of representations of the military in this world. And I don't know if you know this, but a lot of bronies are military or veterans. Yeah, it's a really weird thing about the My Little Pony fandom that just ended up that way. And a lot of them, including me, although I'm not a veteran and I was never in the military, do have a problem with the fact that it seems like the military in this world is just incompetent. And it would have been nice to get a better showing of them. This is not such a big deal in Season 1, but as we go along, it becomes a huge problem because the guard is absolutely stupid. So Rainbow Dash, in her effort to fly down and get Rarity, she's going so fast to try to catch up to save Rarity and the Wonderbolts that she accidentally breaks through the sound barrier or the color barrier or whatever, and she performs the Sonic Rainboom entirely by accident. So it really was just a confidence issue, and when her friend's life was on the line, she did it, just by accident. Now this leads to a payoff with Fluttershy in terms of her inability to yell a cheer loudly. I love that moment. That's a great moment. So we have a little reconciliation where Rarity apologizes for basically making it all about her, and Rainbow realizes that it really was just a confidence issue. And we get a nice little stinger where the bullies kind of, in a gentle way, get what they deserve.
We're really sorry we gave you such a hard time before.
That's okay.
Do you want to hang out with us?
Sorry, boys, but I've got plans.
I really like this episode a lot, and I wouldn't rank it in among my favorite episodes, but it is a really good one. It has some funny moments, and it has a nice focus on Rarity, who again is like my favorite character.
Contestant number 15! And thirdly, contestant number 4.
Rainbow Dash learns and grows during this episode, and I don't think Rainbow in Season 1 is that interesting of a character. I think that Rainbow, as the series, from like Season 2 onward, the amount of growth and development she gets is amazing. By Season 9, she is almost a different character. She's so much more responsible and caring and concerned about the people around her, where in Season 1, she comes off as more as kind of an arrogant jock airhead. And what I like about Rainbow's development as a character is that she eventually becomes the sort of character who realizes that she can love to read and still be an athlete. She can care for a little sister and have sort of a family dynamic with somebody else that's different than her own family because her own family is a little smothering, and still be cool. She can care more about others than herself while still taking care of herself. This is what makes Rainbow such an iconically great character. So this is among the first times we see growth from her, but it's not as real and substantial a growth as we get later, and that's why it's not among my favorites. But some of my very favorite episodes of the show are when Rainbow learns the most, because I think she is actually the character among the main 6 who did develop the most and had the most to learn from the beginning. The Stairmaster. Now, this one is a really interesting one from my perspective because it is the episode where I first started to gain some respect for Fluttershy. I've said before that although Fluttershy seems to be like everybody's favorite, I just always thought she was the least interesting and the least fun to go on an adventure with. But this episode was the first time in the series that I remember thinking, you know what? I have some respect for Fluttershy. Even though she's still not my favorite character, I do appreciate that she is not a bad character, and in fact, she has her moments of greatness. What's wild is that this is also the first true Cutie Mark Crusaders episode. Now, I remember also thinking at the time that with Season 1 and Season 2, some of the episodes with the Cutie Mark Crusaders kind of lagged for me. They were the sort of thing where I was kind of like, man, I kind of would rather be with the main 6. But over the years, and especially getting into the later seasons, in particular season 5, I really love the Cutie Mark Crusaders. And coming back to season 1 and season 2 now, although I've watched this, I've watched this series so many times, but every time I come back nowadays, I always really find their episodes to be ones that I get particularly excited about because I love these 3. Sweetie Belle, Scootaloo, and Apple Bloom are surprisingly deep characters with really unique characterizations that the more you get to see them, the more you kind of pick up on how different their personalities are. In season 1, it was kind of a problem to me that they did seem a little interchangeable in season 1. But as the show continued on, that got a lot better. And like I said, they're some of my favorite characters now. In particular, Scootaloo. She's my favorite. Now, the reason I say this episode gave me a lot of respect for Flutters is really comes down to the fact that there's a point where the Cutie Mark Crusaders go into the Everfree Forest, which is a, terrifying, dark place. We've seen multiple times that Fluttershy is petrified of this forest, and yet she goes in there to save these kids. That mad respect, because there's so many times in the series later on where we see Fluttershy avoiding responsibilities because of her cowardice. And I always respected, though, that when the lives of children were on the line, Fluttershy goes out there and she's willing to put her own life at stake. And she actually does do that for real in this episode. They meet a cockatrice, which is an interesting fictional mythological creature, because until I saw this series, I'd never heard of it. So major points to whoever on the production team knew what that was. That's kind of crazy to me. It has a power that's sort of like a basilisk, except instead of just outright killing you, its stare turns you to stone. Now, this is a great little one-to-one kind of foil to Fluttershy, because we learn in this episode that she has a special power called the stare. And the stare is basically this look of like intense anger or intimidation that she can give to animals, and animals typically will react to that and obey whatever she wants them to do, which is something that morally she actually feels she can't use very often, because if she got to where she abused it, she could easily take it too far. Again, crazy mad respect for Fluttershy in this episode. The fact that she has given this so much thought about her morals and when and how she should use this special ability of hers. Now, I say it's the first real Cutie Mark Crusaders episode because we've not really seen them going out looking for their cutie marks yet, which becomes their forte throughout the series. That's more than half of the series. That is their main characterization, is looking for their cutie marks and trying to earn them. I just find it very interesting that the very first episode we get after they form a group, they're going out to look for their cutie marks, but it's kind of seen as like a little kid sort of thing where the adults are it's a nuisance to them. Fluttershy, again, saves the day by staring down the cockatrice, and even as it's turning her to stone, even as she knows this could be the end for her and the kids, she continues to give the cockatrice the stare. And it's so intimidated by it that it actually breaks off its stare. It can't keep staring back at Fluttershy. I always comment on the comedy in these episodes, and this one has some good moments where Sweetie Belle busts in the song and sings the lullaby at 80 times the volume she should be. And there's some other little fun moments. In particular, I like Twilight just kind of wandering into this episode randomly, even though it's not about her at all. So that's about all my comments on this one. It's not one of my favorite episodes, but again, it is something that in regards to Fluttershy's character, I always really appreciated that this shows her off as a much more three-dimensional character than she's been showed up to this point in season 1. This one is the first Cutie Mark Crusader episode that is kind of the official setting of the tone in what we're going to see in all the Cutie Mark Crusader episodes going forward. This is the basic formula. Cutie Mark Crusaders have an idea of how to get their cutie marks. They go out and execute that idea. They do a terribly ridiculous, misguided thing that all the adults in their life have told them not to do or warned them against or told them, why don't you try something else? But they don't want to. They want to do their own thing. A hilarity ensues, they mess up, they learn a lesson, and they don't get their cutie marks. This continues until season 5. Now, I said in the last episode, but that last episode was the first true Cutie Mark Crusaders episode, in the sense that they are together trying to get their cutie marks. However, this one is the first true one in the sense of it being an episode about them. That previous episode was really more about Fluttershy. Still have to count it, though, because they are, in fact, going out and getting into trouble and learning a lesson because they're looking for their cutie marks. But this one is all about them. And this one sets up a lot for future episodes. For instance, when we first meet Scootaloo at the opening of this episode, she is riding through town on her scooter. Now, you would expect Scootaloo, who rides a scooter, might have the special talent of riding scooters. I know. Wild. I mean, who would have thought? But I'm not even talking about that, although her talent for riding the scooter does play into a lot of her future episodes. What I'm really talking about as far as setup goes is that we actually see this entire scene being paid homage to and kind of being paid off in a later episode, which we'll get to. It has one of my favorite songs in it, Heart's Strongest Horses. Applejack introduces the Cutie Mark Crusaders to a tree house, which she used to play in, that is on the Apple family orchard, and tells them that that can be their clubhouse for the Crusaders. And going forward, it is. We never see them use any other headquarters, really. So they're fixing up the old tree house, and they kind of have this moment where they kind of give their mission statement to Applejack about what they're going to do to find their cutie marks, and it's one of my favorite Applejack moments. It's something I quote all the time. They're all talking over each other, they overwhelm her, and Applejack just blurts out,
Well, okay then.
Now, I drive my wife kind of nuts with this, probably, because every time she gives me like 10 instructions at a time, I'll just go, well, okay then. And because that's kind of like my vocal stem for when that happens. And I think she gets the message. It's like, okay, all right, let me make you a list. Anyway, it's one of those little moments that I mentioned before, where without Ashley Ball's great performance as Applejack, the line, well, okay then, is not really that funny. She just makes it really funny. As the Crusaders go off to find their cutie mark, and we have a little montage of them doing a bunch of different things, which they are not any good at, we get a great little piece of music called The Cutie Mark Crusaders Go Crusading, which is one of my favorite pieces of music from the show. In fact, for years, I had it as a ringtone. In fact, the only reason I don't anymore is because I got a new phone. Hold on a second. So Apple Bloom, Sweetie Belle, and Scootaloo all enter into a talent competition. And they all choose things that they want to do for the show and for their talent, which are the exact opposite of what they should be doing. So I'll give you an example. Apple Bloom is really good at hammering things together, but she doesn't want to do the sets. She wants to choreograph the dances. Sweetie Belle is a great singer, but she doesn't want to sing. As you might expect, hilarity ensues. They end up singing a wonderfully bad song in Kiss-style costumes. Again, hilarity ensues as the sets fall apart. They're singing out of key. Everything is going wrong in this talent show, and their act is miserable. But the judges think that it's a comedy act and that it's meant to be bad, so they actually end up winning a prize for it. So this is one of the few episodes where they don't really learn any kind of lesson. In fact, they actually think that they were pretty much correct in what they were doing. They just had the wrong attitude about it, which is kind of a funny thing for a kid show to do. Typically, you have to learn a lesson, but for this, they don't. And in fact, Twilight kind of ends the episode with a little bit of a stinger that kind of makes you think any kids watching it would be like, oh, come on, girls. Now, there was something that I worried about the first time I watched this episode. It seemed to me like they were pretty much telling us what the girls' special talents were. That Apple Bloom would be a builder, and Sweetie Belle would be a singer, and Scootaloo would be a scooterer. Now, happily, that is not what they do. Their cutie marks are completely different, but we have to wait till season 5 for me to talk about that. this episode is one of my favorites because it features my favorite of the main cast, Rarity. Well, of course, as I've said before, she's tied with Applejack as my favorite, but I love any Rarity-centric episode where she's the main character. The others have a good part in it too, and they do show some good moments for the other main cast, especially Spike, who I've said in season 1, 2, and majority of season 3 I find kind of insufferable. But this is a really good episode, and this is a really good Rarity episode. In this episode, we meet a group called the Diamond Dogs, and the Diamond Dogs kidnap Rarity and take her down into their tunnels so that she can use her special talent of finding diamonds. Now, we get later clarification on this, and again, I've said before, there's a specific episode I think should have come earlier in this season because we lose some of the context for this stuff. Like, Rarity's special talent is actually not dressmaking, it's finding diamonds. Now, you would never know that if all you ever saw was the first 20-some episodes. You would think her special talent was making dresses in and of itself, but it's not. Now, this is great because Spike ends up going back to the other main 6 characters and saying, like, we gotta go find Rarity. And in his fantasy world, in his fantasy imagination, he's like this big, strong, buff hero who's gonna come in and save her like a knight in shining armor. Then the others have this fantasy about, they have like this kind of thought about Rarity that because she's so dainty that she'll go down there and just completely melt down because she won't be able to take all the dirt and stuff.
But Rarity won't even touch mud unless it's imported.
Oh, woe is me! Whatever shall I do? Filthy, disgusting dirt! It stings! It burns!
That being said, the real Rarity in this situation uses her resourcefulness as somebody who is typically kind of a little more prissy to actually turn the tables on the Diamond Dogs.
So you may call me Miss or Rarity.
Enough! You're whining!
I am not whining. I am complaining. Do you want to hear whining? Jay, can you loosen it? Oh, it hurts!
Make it stop! Stop whining!
Rarity has some of my favorite lines she ever has in the whole series in this episode. And that really comes down to her playing up how dainty she is in order to win the Diamond Dog's sympathy or to annoy them so much that she eventually kind of rules over them until salvation comes and the others come to rescue her. In fact, when they get there, it seems like Rarity really didn't need saving. She probably could have stayed down there for at least several months ruling over these guys and felt pretty good about herself.
So picky!
And critical.
She won't stop talking! We, give her back, yes. You're letting her leave? With all these jewels? Take them, and her with them, please!
The lesson of this episode is one that I've always thought was kind of unique and fun. It's that you shouldn't underestimate your friends. Sometimes your friends who seem to be the most incapable in whatever situation you're imagining may actually turn out to surprise you. They may be able to handle way more than you expect. Rarity is a fashionista. She is a girly girl. And so you would think that she couldn't really defend herself if you just saw her out in the wild. And yet, we clearly see in this episode that she has the ability to kind of play a situation to her advantage. Again, I just love Rarity, and I think this is a great Rarity episode. The Diamond Dogs are also great antagonists, and it's a real shame that besides a couple of appearances in the background of the Equestria Girls series, we never really get them as chief villains again, because they're really fun. I love the way they all have this weird, like, Peter Lorre style voice. They're just fabulous little characters, and they're just like, again, they're one-off characters. They have no right to be so memorable, and yet the Diamond Dogs, they're fascinating. I would have loved if at the end of season 5, one of the apocalypses we see, well, don't worry, I'll explain when we get there if you've not seen the series, but one of the apocalypses we see should have been the Diamond Dogs enslaving the ponies and having them go find diamonds. That would have been really, really fun, but unfortunately, we never really get to see much of them again. I don't have anything at all negative to say about this episode. To my mind, it would probably be in my top 10 favorite episodes of the show, because I love Rarity, and I love seeing her interact in this way with these characters. For this episode, 10 out of 10. I love it. So, if you haven't seen it, all of the episodes of Friendship is Magic is on YouTube, and if you don't want to go that far, you can always watch it on Tubi. In fact, if you watch it in kid mode, you don't even have to sit through ads. Season 1, Episode 20, Green Isn't Your Color. Fabulous. The last episode was a Rarity-centric one, and this next one is also Rarity-centric. I've said before that Fluttershy is not my favorite of the main 6. In fact, she is my least favorite of the main characters, in the 6 main characters of the cast. However, I've said repeatedly, I don't mind Fluttershy. I don't hate her or anything, and there are some episodes where she really stands out. And this is another episode of Fluttershy's that I really enjoy her characterization. It's a little bit more complicated than a lot of her later stories, where a lot of them just focus on her shyness and her timidity. This episode does not do that. This episode focuses very much on a kind of a problem that really I could only see these 2 ponies having. So the episode starts out, it turns out that Rarity is having a big photo shoot with Photo Finish. I love Photo Finish. She should have been in way more episodes. She is so funny. The magics.
It is time to make the magics.
And she asks Fluttershy, as the most beautiful pony she knows, to go, which seems to me like a bit of an overstatement, but I mean, like, you know, they all have the same body types. Like, anybody could style their hair like Fluttershy and it'll look about the same. So Rarity is like, hey, you need to model for me for these pictures. Well, she does. It turns out Fluttershy actually just has something very photogenic about her, and Photo Finish turns Fluttershy into a huge model, but she's not interested in Rarity's dresses. So here's the conflict. Rarity was the one who actually wants fame, right, for her skills. Fluttershy, on the other hand, didn't want any fame or attention, but she's getting all of it for something she can't even control. Man, that is great. I mean, like, it would be one thing if they were both doing a skill and they both earned this, but no, like, Fluttershy admits herself, like, she doesn't know why people find her so beautiful to look at. And I think actually that might be one of the reasons. I've never heard a fan of the show say this, but I think maybe subconsciously this might be one of the reasons why so many people love Fluttershy, because there is a humility, modesty, I guess you'd say, about Fluttershy, that although everybody around her seems to think she's beautiful, she has a beautiful singing voice, some of the fans are weirdly attracted to Fluttershy. Don't ask me why. It's a weird. So clearly there's something about her, and I think part of it is the fact that she doesn't see it herself. She doesn't understand why other people find her an engaging soul to be around. In fact, there are times when it seems like she might even think a little bit too little of herself. Maybe she needs to have a little bit of a self-esteem boost, you know? I love the realism of this episode in one sense. Rarity is angry about this. But she's trying not to hurt Fluttershy because she wants Fluttershy to be successful because she's her friend. Yet it doesn't stop her from having moments where she just says, hey, I kind of wish that something really bad would happen and she would stop being a model because I don't really want her to do that. She actually says, like, she's a star and I wish that star would burn out. And Twilight's like, what?
She's a big, bright, shining star. I wish that star would burn out.
Fluttershy is your friend.
I know.
And Rarity's like, I know, I don't know. I don't even know why I'm saying this. I don't mean that. But I love that about the fact that they're so open about this. Some people who dislike Rarity's character might use that as a way to be like, oh yeah, Rarity. But I love that about her. I love that that's something that a lot of people do feel about their friends occasionally. Is like, man, like I just want to punch that person in the face. They are like, I love them, but they annoy the crap out of me sometimes, you know? So I love the fact is they just address it and just bluntly say it. And again, I really love the fact that Fluttershy, the only reason she goes along with this is because of Rarity. It's an understandable misunderstanding. The fact that Rarity, in trying to be a supportive friend, is like, no, you must. You have to go do this. You must. You must.
You must. You must. You must.
But Fluttershy doesn't want this. She's only doing it because she thinks Rarity will be disappointed if she throws away that much fame. On the other hand, Rarity doesn't really want Fluttershy to suffer, but at the same time, she's like, that wasn't mine. I was supposed to have that. In the middle of this, Twilight actually finds out about both sides of this, but both friends swear her to secrecy, so she can't tell. And this is another little moment of development for Twilight's character, because we learn she cannot keep a secret to save her soul. There's some great moments of comedy, like with all the episodes of Friendship is Magic. Twilight keeps continually wanting to tell, but Pinkie Pie is like, if you tell, you'll lose your friend's trust forever.
Forever!
I think Pinkie Pie sometimes is almost underrated with her humor. Like, because she's meant to be the comedic relief, I feel like sometimes we just get used to it. Again, just like the last episode, this is one of my favorite episodes of season 1. I really love this episode. I find it so interesting, the dynamic between these friends. It's funny, it's charming, it's Rarity-centric. I love Rarity. Again, I can't recommend this one enough. Out of the season 1 episodes, this is definitely one you have to check out. If you only are going to watch some of the episodes, you don't want to sit through a whole season, this is one I highly recommend you check out. Today I'm going to be doing this voice only for this episode because my dog has been barking her head off. My kid is busy watching Daniel Tiger for exactly 5 minutes, so I wanted to just go ahead and make this video really, really quick so that I wasn't getting too far off my schedule. Today we're talking about Over a Barrel. This is one of my favorite episodes of season 1 of My Little Pony, and I think a big part of the reason for that is because the message is so mature. And I mean, even compared to some of the other episodes that I've said that about, this one is especially so. So this episode starts off with one of my favorite Applejack moments. It's her falling over a tree named Bloomberg. You think that like they have like a friend or something they're bringing on this trip with them. No, it's actually that Applejack has rented an entire train car just to keep this tree comfortable. She covers it up with a blanket. She reads its stories. It's almost kind of sick the way she treats this tree. I really think it's funny. They're taking it to Appaloosa, which is a place we get introduced to in this episode and rarely see again, but my gosh, the character of this place is incredible. The amount of world building they do in a way that's both goofy and funny, but also it kind of makes sense. Like, there's nothing irrational about most of it. It's just the fact that they thought through the world building in a way that, like, the stuff that is named is puns, but it's also puns that actually there's no reason they couldn't exist in this world. So they're throwaway jokes, but if you consider them part of the world building, it doesn't actually fracture anything. It's really quite fun.
Welcome to Appaloosa! Boggles the mind, we settler ponies built all this in just the past year, don't it? Horse-drawn carriages.
Okay, you pull now.
We just switched. Horse-drawn carriages. The salt block.
That's enough salt for you!
Wild West dances. And here's where we have our Mild West dances.
On the way to Appaloosa, they end up getting robbed of their tree by a herd of buffalo dressed like Native Americans. Now, this episode I've always thought was quite cool because I have a lot of Native American ancestry in my family, and I always thought that this episode depicted them. First off, making them buffalo is a really cool idea. It gives them a very distinct look. So they actually are a different race in this universe, but the fact that we draw the parallels to point out how similar they are. You know, they're both hoofed creatures. They're both vegetarians. These creatures actually, there's no reason they shouldn't be able to live in this world side by side without fighting. Just like different races in the real world, you know, we should be able to get along. Along the way, we get 2 jokes that I find really humorous. The first is something that became kind of a meme where Fluttershy is concerned.
We'll have to carry that heavy tree all the way from the train to the orchard? You mean Bloomberg?
No, Fluttershy.
What's going on?
Rainbow Dash thinks Fluttershy's a tree. She's not a tree, Dashy. I'd like to be a tree.
Now that's pretty funny and all. I mean, like I said, it became a meme. It got blown way out of proportion. But the joke, I think, is the funniest in this episode in terms of just making you wonder how it ended up in My Little Pony. Is this joke?
Well, that was kind of Huffy.
Huffy the magic dragon.
The Buffaloes accidentally kidnap Spike when they're taking the tree, and they feel really bad about this. It was not their intention to do that. Well, Rainbow Dash and Pinky end up going out to find Spike, and when they do, they hear the Buffalo tell them how the settler ponies have planted an apple orchard in their traditional stamping grounds. This is the reason why they are fighting back in the only way they can, by stopping them from importing any more trees. Now, I think this might be the real reason I love this episode, is just the fact that you can read so much into this one little scene. I'm probably going to get a copyright flag for this, but I'm going to show you as much of the scene as possible, because I really want you to get a sense of what this scene is doing.
Strongheart here to explain to the Appaloosans why they should move the apple trees off Buffalo land.
That information will be quite helpful.
That's weird, because my cousin Brayburn here wants to explain to the Buffalo why they should let the apple trees stay.
That would be a useful thing to... The land is theirs. You planted the trees not knowing that. Honest mistake. Now, you just gotta move them, that's all.
Well, they busted their rumps here, and now they're supposed to bust their rumps again just because some buffalo won't stampede someplace else? Plant the trees somewhere else. Where? It's the only flat land around these parts. The buffalo had it first. The settler ponies need it to live.
Yeah, I mean, this is basically the state of modern politics, isn't it? Two people completely unrelated to the issue arguing with each other to the death and destroying their friendships. Meanwhile, the actual people affected stand off in the background and look confused. Well, Pinkie Pie sings a song about sharing and caring, and yes, it is a goofy, over-the-top song. What I find more distracting is the fact that they put her in a showgirl outfit with fishnet stockings, and then people wonder why the folks in this generation grew up so effed up. Pinkie Pie's song does more damage than good, because far from listening to the message of it, they both just agree that it's an awful song, which is quite funny. And they decide that tomorrow at noon, we're going to attack, and we're going to take back the stamping grounds from the settler ponies, and you can't do anything about it. And so they prepare for war, and the settler ponies prepare to fight in the only way they can, by making pies. That is really silly. And so, as expected, the climax is a huge slapstick battle where the buffaloes are tearing apart the town and the settlers are throwing pies in their face. And the buffaloes are acting like they've been mortally wounded every time they get hit by a pie. It's super funny. It's fun because by doing this, I think Zootopia does this really well too. By making this animals and not real people, I think you're free to find it funnier than you would if this was actually Native Americans and white people. I mean, this would not be nearly as funny if it was done with real actors. Now, the buffalo almost don't attack at all, but Pinkie Pie starts singing again, and that sets them off, which is really funny. Now, this is another fun way of, like, if you want to read way too deeply into this, you can see how people, again, who have nothing to do with the situation, getting involved, or overly involved, can regularly spark off more battles with their good-intentioned but terribly executed efforts to bridge the battles themselves without letting the other people involved actually get to the root of the problem. Which, by the way, again, that scene really indicates could have happened. These people could have just talked it out, but you get other folks getting involved and messing it up even further. During the battle, the chief gets hit in the face with a pie, and he accidentally eats some. Well, upon finding out that the pies are actually, like, the best thing he's ever tasted, apparently, he agrees that they will share the stomping grounds with the apple orchard, in exchange for the settler ponies giving them pies. In other words, exactly what should have happened to begin with. The settlers should have just rented or paid for the use of a certain amount of land. This is basically a lease. Why they couldn't have done that to begin with is highly questionable. But then again, it actually does raise that real-life question, doesn't it? Why couldn't some of the things that have happened in the past have just been done more reasonably? Well, is one side to blame or the other side to blame? It's hard to say. These issues are not always as simple and clear-cut as they appear. But then, the lesson of this episode really does get to the heart of it. if we all try to care about each other and realize that we're all human and share, then we can come to a better agreement, giving back what is rightfully the property of somebody else without costing ourselves the things we need to live. We can learn to share if everybody's willing to compromise. Of course, again, in real life, things are not so simple. In real life, both sides can be unwilling to compromise, and that can screw up everything. But it's a nice lesson for another generation of people and the next generation to learn as kids. That maybe if you grow up with the right mindset, we might be able to just learn to share and learn to care. I know that's cheesy, but it's true. And I really like this episode. I think the execution was daring. This time we are talking about episode 22 of season 1, A Bird in the Hoof. Now, this episode is once again another Fluttershy-centric episode, and I say at the beginning of every episode with her that she is my least favorite of the main characters. But that being said, I gotta say, Fluttershy does something really wrong in this episode, but I like that they actually give her really good motivation to do it. So, Princess Celestia comes to town, and by the way, Princess Celestia is the best part of this episode. This is kind of among the first little glimpses we get into who Celestia is. It's easy when you first watch the show to get kind of that Gandalf, Dumbledore sort of vibe, where she's going to be like the wise old mentor, and much like Dumbledore, though, where you get little hints that he is, a little goofier than you would expect him to be. Celestia also turns out to be a prankster. She is kind of not very self-aware. She's a bad actress, for instance. She does a lot of silly things that as you get to know her as a person, you realize, unlike most people in children's cartoons with the title princess, she is just a normal person. And I love that about Celestia. 1,000 years of reigning as the princess, and there's still a great humility about her. There's still a lot of fun in her life and in her personality. She hasn't been completely sucked dry by this position.
Teacup at 4 o'clock!
I see it, honey bun.
Oh, thank you.
Not at all, your highness.
Gotcha.
What Fluttershy does wrong is she sees that Princess Celestia's pet bird is pretty much on the brink of death. This poor thing looks really worse for the wear. And rather than talking about the issue and asking Celestia about the bird, she just steals the bird. And I think that's actually pretty funny on the one hand, but it's also, her motivation is kind of good when you really look at it, because she's like, Celestia is kind of, seems like she's abusing this animal, so, like, and Celestia is the highest power in the land, so how are you going to get justice for that? We live in a world now where if you see a dog in a hot car, you can break the window and not get in trouble for taking that person's dog out. Stealing somebody's pet is wrong, but at the same time, the ethical dilemma of this animal being in trouble is a good one. However, what I like about this is Celestia is in kind of a different position where Fluttershy is concerned, because they're not total strangers, and she is interacting with Celestia in this episode, so she could have and should have just asked Celestia about the bird. As you might expect, as you get into this episode, you very quickly realize what the twist is going to be. Philomena, the bird, is a phoenix. Yet another little nod that Celestia has that sort of Dumbledore energy. Not the Dumbledore from the movies, but the actual Dumbledore from the book. That sort of silly childishness that he has about him. And she owns the same pet that Dumbledore does, too. Now, after a really funny series of events where Fluttershy and Twilight are trying to save this bird and heal the bird and get it back to, full health, and Twilight trying to get the bird back to Celestia and even panicking and convincing Fluttershy that Celestia will punish her in this incredibly over-the-top way.
She might banish you from Equestria, or throw you in a dungeon, or banish banish you and then throw you in a dungeon in the place that she banishes you to.
You really think the princess would do that?
Granted, that probably won't happen, but do you want to take any chances?
At the end of the episode, Celestia doesn't punish them at all, but instead understands where they're coming from and encourages more communication in the future. These are all great lessons for kids to learn, and a moral dilemma, which again is just totally understandable. So this was a short review for today. I was getting a little bit behind, and I just wanted to make sure that I didn't get behind on these reviews because there were several months where I didn't upload anything for them, so I wanted to keep going. But this episode I really didn't have a whole lot of thoughts on. It's very funny, the lesson is good, and again, the moral position that they have to kind of suss out is interesting. It's something that is a little bit more grown up, and that was one of the things that attracted me to the show when I first started watching it. Was very often they will kind of take you in one direction, then shift gears, and you think they're going in this really well plotted out, stereotypical, archetypal direction, and they'll kind of pull a fast one on you. This episode was a little bit more predictable in terms of you kind of got that it was going to be a phoenix way before the characters did, but at the same time, it was curious to see where this was all going to end up and how the solution was going to pan out. And if you were a kid who didn't know what a phoenix was, when Philomena bursts into flames, it actually would be kind of startling, especially when Fluttershy just dissolves in tears over it. Alright, new year, new me, and all that good stuff. I have decided I am done with Season 1 of MLP. We've just been on this way too long, and it's because my schedule has been so busy that I just keep bopping back and forth between a consistent upload schedule and an inconsistent one. But today, we are finishing My Little Pony Season 1. Strap in, gents. Next episode is episode 23, The Cutie Mark Chronicles, and this might be my very favorite episode in Season 1. So after nearly a full season of trying to get their cutie marks, the Crusaders finally have the unbelievable, unparalleled idea, hey, maybe we should ask some other people how they got their cutie marks. Now, ultimately, really, Scootaloo wants to ask Rainbow Dash, but along the way they end up meeting the other main 6 characters and consistently getting their stories out of them. First is Applejack, who it turns out left the Apple family wanting to be a big city pony, and she went with her uncle and Aunt Orange for a while in Manhattan. Apples and oranges, get it? It's really funny. I think there is something really cool and honestly really adorable about young Applejack trying to fit in with these ponies, that it's almost like a 2-minute version of My Fair Lady. There's something really charming about the way she tries to fit in, but ultimately the way she realizes that this is not her home. And as much as she liked the idea of being a big city pony, none of this ultimately gels with her or her personality or who she wants to be. The thing that ultimately tells her, yeah, I'm just going to go home, is she sees a rainbow blazing across the sky leading back to Ponyville. Fluttershy gets her cutie mark because Rainbow Dash is defending her honor against these guys who are bullying her. During this, Fluttershy happens to fall off of a cloud. She's falling to her death, even though she's a Pegasus, because when she's scared, she can't fly. This is one of the reasons that I'm not a huge fan of Fluttershy. But she's saved by a huge cushion of butterflies. This is part of the reason why her cutie mark is a butterfly. She realizes that she has a way with animals, and this is her first time she's ever been on the ground. And that her love of everything down here is just so great that she never wants to go back to live among the clouds. In a way, she's sort of like an earth pony living in a Pegasus's body. And I think the whole moment is kind of undercut for me personally, specifically because I think it's one of the worst songs in Season 1. After this, we hear Rarity's story of how she got her cutie mark. And this is why I've said before that, funny enough, Rarity's cutie mark is actually that her special talent is finding jewels, not dressmaking. This is an interesting piece of lore because it means that the special talent / destiny of the person may be tied to talents that are only tangentially related to their special talent. So Rarity's special talent is not dressmaking. It's something that she loves and devotes her life to, and her special talent helps her do it. However, it's not actually her chief motivation. I've always thought that made Rarity a really interesting character, and I've never heard anybody really talk about it in the fandom. There's also a really funny moment where Rarity's magic acts up by itself and drags her halfway across Equestria, and Rarity does not understand why it's happening. Twilight Sparkle tells them about her cutie mark, and this is another piece of character and lore building that I think is just really fascinating. Once Twilight determined that what she wanted to devote her life to was magic, she studied constantly until she eventually had her kind of entry placement test to get into Celestia's special magic school. At which point she had kind of an instinctive piece of magic which was so powerful that it not only caused the dragon egg she was supposed to be cracking to crack, and that's how Spike was born, kind of a Spike origin story, but it shows how Twilight determined what she wanted her special talent, what she wanted her destiny to be, and went out and made it happen. And fate kind of recognized that. It's an interesting piece of lore building. As I said, it's just much like Rarity's. It's odd that there is something where it seems like a pony can devote themselves to something so specifically that they develop a special talent rather than it kind of being just predetermined. Of course, you could argue with the stuff later in the show that it was predetermined, but still, Twilight's personality had to kind of predispose her down that path, and it wasn't something she was just blessed with like Rarity. No, it was something she had to actually work on. Rarity had a piece of special magic, the very powerful magic, that just kind of came out of her, where Twilight had to absorb all of this knowledge in before she could develop the talent at all. Just fascinating. We see the origin of Pinkie Pie, who grew up on a rock farm, and that's just hilarious. Her full family are like Amish, and they all have these very placid, straight faces. Now Rarity, when she finds a rock filled with jewels, can't access it until a booming explosion sends a shockwave and cracks open the rock. Twilight can't get her magic to work. I guess she has performance anxiety, and it's only in a reaction to a booming shockwave that she is able to perform her magic. Pinkie only realizes her love of bright colors and parties and her desire to be very different from her family when she sees a rainbow streaking the sky for the first time. Again, Applejack sees a rainbow that leads her home. Fluttershy realizes her capacity to calm the animals once a explosion and a rainbow scare all of the woodland animals away, and she discovers she's able to comfort them. Now, you're probably getting the idea by this point. Rainbow Dash finally tells her story, and during the race where she's defending Fluttershy's honor, accentuating her loyalty, right? She goes so fast that she breaks through the sound barrier, color barrier. Ooh, that sounds kind of racist, doesn't it? She breaks through whatever and creates the Sonic Rain Boom, the thing of legend. She is able to perform this trick, which everybody thought was a myth and could not actually be done. It sends a huge sonic boom followed by a massive, dazzlingly bright rainbow all across Equestria. So that's right, Rainbow Dash's first rain boom caused all of the others to get her cutie mark, and as a result of doing the rain boom, Rainbow got her own cutie mark. That means the destiny of these 6 were tied together a decade or more before they even, most of them anyway, knew each other. These 6 friends were kind of tied together, and even in season 1, we're getting the idea that cutie marks actually in some way don't just mean something like a special talent, but they're in some way tied to the pony's actual destiny. The cutie mark in some way is determinative, or maybe illustrative that fate in some way knows that these ponies are going to make their mark and play their part in a specific way later down the road. If you've seen the other later episodes, you know what I just did in that sentence. And, listen, I think it's worth at least a little bro hoof. Come on, give me some. This is one of my favorite episodes in the whole series. And it's one of my favorite episodes of season 1. Now, I did say back when we were talking about the Young Flyers competition that I thought that episode should have aired later after another episode. And I said we'd get to it when we got to that episode. Well, we're here now. I think this episode should have aired first. And the reason why is that we're already told in that episode that Rainbow had performed the Sonic Rain Boom one time before. We don't get told what that time was, but we know that there's a lot of pressure on her to do it again. And personally, I think it would have meant more. I think that the tension, the stress on Rainbow to do it, actually would have been, I think, a bigger amount of stress on her, because now she's trying to prove and replicate that it wasn't just this one-off moment, but that this thing that connected all of them as friends is something she's capable of repeating. In a way, it's sort of like doing it in the name of their friendship. I don't know. It just seems to me like we should have seen this episode first, and then we would have understood what the Sonic Rain Boom was. I know maybe the idea was to hold it so that when you see it happen, it's more spectacular, but I don't know. Maybe it's just me. I thought this episode should have come first. And I love that moral that Twilight gives at the end. Hey, you might be attached to somebody in this very specific and interesting way, and you don't even know it yet. But it's possible maybe you and your future friends are looking at the same rainbow. That's a cool message. A little bit on the cheesy side, but, I like cheesy things. Again, one of my favorite episodes in the series, so not much more to say. Let's just move on to the next episode. Next on the roster is episode 24, Owl's Well That Ends Well. And this one I'm kind of torn on because most people, myself included, not a huge fan of Spike in season 1. In fact, I don't really think Spike comes into his own as a character until about season 4. Season 3 is not so bad, but that's a short season. So here's where I'm torn. This is where we first start to get Spike kind of showing his anxieties and his insecurities as a person. He's also younger than the rest of the cast, and even though it's only by a couple years, some people go, if they call him a baby dragon, so he must be, substantially younger. But, you see in the previous episode how Twilight was effectively a kindergartner, maybe first grade, at the time Spike was hatched out of his egg. Which, I don't know, to me it seems like there must not really be much more than about 5 years between the two of them. And if we're going by what most fans think, Twilight's about 20, 21. She's around college age, and the rest of the cast follows suit roughly around those ages, which means Spike has to be, 16 or 17. But all of these cast members, because it's a children's show, do kind of act younger than they are at times, but sometimes they act much older. And all of these main characters have their own businesses and jobs. They're out on their own. Twilight, again, seems more like a college student, still learning. Applejack's running a business with her family. Rarity is running a fashion empire within just a couple years of the show's first episode. Fluttershy is running kind of an animal sanctuary, which grows exponentially as the show goes on. Pinkie Pie is the most successful party planner in town. And it's just really hard to say that these people are that young. So yeah, Spike may be younger than them, but he can't be substantially younger. Anyway, with that rant out of the way, Spike does act more immature in this episode, but it's the sort of thing that I would still imagine a 12 to 15-year-old doing. He damages Twilight's book, and instead of telling her, he hides it back on the shelf in the library and just hopes she won't need it anytime soon. Now, during this episode, we get another joke, much like the Huffy the Magic Dragon joke. Now, season 1 was not a point where they would have known or been able to guess that this show was going to pick up a fan base of mostly adults. So it is kind of weird that they made jokes like Huffy the Magic Dragon and the punch has been spiked. During this episode, Twilight meets her pet owl, Aloysius. Very clever name, if I do say so myself. And again, this is just where we see a lot of Spike's insecurities come in. And some of it's kind of contrived. Like, Rarity gives Spike a big bow to wear around his neck, and then later does the same thing for Aloysius. And this makes Spike jealous, of course, because he's in love with Rarity. But there's not really many times in the whole series where you get the idea that Rarity thinks about Spike as if he is a pet. Now, probably my favorite moment in the whole episode is when Spike dresses like an old 1920s silent film villain with the black cape and the top hat and the big handlebar mustache, and he's ripping apart a mouse toy and pouring ketchup on the ground to try to make it look like Aloysius has murdered a mouse to make Twilight think like, Aloysius is vicious. Nice rhyme. Spike throughout the episode is really just trying to frame Aloysius to make everybody think he's a bad guy, rather than relying on his own merits. But at the same time, this message of the episode is really undercut by the fact that actually Spike is kind of right. Everybody is replacing him with Aloysius. And I guess you could say, like, it's from Spike's perspective, so Spike feels that way, and so that's how he sees it. And we get some indications of stuff like that in other episodes where Spike's memory of events is not exactly as they were objectively witnessed by the audience. But that's the thing. It's Spike's memory, and so it can be subjective. But this is, the audience is seeing things. We expect in a show like this, where they are always more or less objective, that we're going to continue seeing events as they're actually unfurling, and not from the focus of a character who we're not seeing through their POV through the whole episode. So I don't know, that explanation just doesn't do it for me personally. Spike runs away and he ends up in the lair of, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's the same dragon as in Dragonshy. And Spike goes into his cave and the dragon thinks that Spike is trying to steal his jewels because Spike actually is stealing his jewels. He's eating them, but he doesn't realize that they belong to somebody else. The dragon might be a different color, but it's a very similar character design if it's not the same dragon. And Aloysius ends up saving Spike, but it's not as cut and dry as you would think in a lot of kids' episodes. It's not just Aloysius does this, and so Spike gains an appreciation for him. No, Twilight also rescues Spike with Aloysius, and Aloysius helps guide them out of the forest and back to safety. And Twilight ends up actually having to acknowledge the fact that Spike felt insecure about this.
No one could ever replace you, Spike. Not even when you are being a jealous numbskull.
Now, Twilight's explanation I don't think is that great either. She's basically like, well, I need help at night too, Spike. It's not that I'm replacing you, but Aloysius is nocturnal. The problem with that explanation is all of the times that are making Spike jealous, Aloysius is being doted on during the daytime. He's not asleep. If he was asleep all day, then this problem would never have arisen. But at least it is nice that after Spike apologizes for running away, Twilight apologizes and says she should have been more sensitive to his feelings. Which is good. I mean, at least it's not like everything was Spike's fault and nobody acknowledges where they could have also done better. So, given that, it's not a bad episode. I like large swaths of it. In fact, I like Aloysius. I think he's awful cute. And he is pretty useful. There's a running joke that I think is atrocious, where every time the owl says who, Spike is like, oh, why do you keep saying who all the time? Trying to explain who they're talking about. And for some strange reason, Twilight even does the same thing at the end. Like, she forgets that owls only say who, and I just don't think it's a very good joke, particularly to end the episode on. Onward and upward to one of the weirdest episodes of this show. It is such a wild episode, and I'm gonna be blunt. There are times where it's uncomfy, and I'm not the only one with that opinion, by the way. it has some really weird moments. Now, I'm going to say, going into this, that my family has a history of bipolar disorder, and so I don't say this in a mean way. Episode 25, Party of One, makes me genuinely wonder if Pinkie Pie is bipolar. And again, I'm not saying that in like a rude or derogatory sense. I mean that seriously. I think she's bipolar. And probably needs some assistance. The episode starts out with Pinkie Pie throwing a party, and we see throughout the rest of the party that she's trying to throw another party and nobody wants to come to it. And she starts to think that because all of her friends are acting very suspicious and deliberately avoiding her, they're talking about her behind her back, there are good reasons for her to think that they actually are, like, abandoning her, don't want to be her friend anymore, sort of thing. There's even a point where Pinkie Pie's getting really on edge, and she's trying to get information and see, like, in Applejack's barn, because she knows something's going on, and Applejack straight up shuts the barn door on her head, in her face, and it looks really painful. I mean, they make it look unpleasant. And Pinkie Pie is getting angrier the whole time. She ends up interrogating Spike, and being like, tell me what's happening, I want to know what's happening, and Spike doesn't get it. It leads to one of my favorite jokes, something I quote all the time, where Spike is like, looking good, Spike, looking real good. Anytime my wife does something, she's like, what do you think? I go, looking good, honey, looking real good. I don't know why that moment struck me so funny, but it's something I've always held with me. And at a certain point, Pinkie Pie is like trying to grill him, and he doesn't know what she wants, so she's like demanding answers, and he's like, what do you want me to say? And she's like, you just need to tell me that my friends don't like me anymore and they don't want to be my friend anymore. And Spike's like, okay, fine, your friends don't like you and they don't want to be your friend anymore. And he doesn't say it like cruelly, he's saying it because she actually is like putting him under serious duress. And as soon as this happens, this is like so unbelievably uncomfortable. Her hair loses all of its fluff. Her color scheme gets noticeably darker, and then she goes off by herself and starts having like a tea party sort of situation with these inanimate objects that are all based on the personalities of her friends. And every time her psyche seems to kind of like fracture a little bit, she like does like a Mr. Crocker sort of face, and the background warps into this like uncanny tie-dye, like, it just, the whole scene is so uncomfortable. And, oh my gosh, I don't like it. Like, I know some people find it really funny. I do not. I think there's something really disturbing about this episode. Now, understand, I'm not saying I dislike the episode. I actually really like this episode. But it's the way I like a horror movie. I know that's weird to say about My Little Pony of all things, but again, that being said, I like the episode, but it worries me for Pinkie Pie. Like, I love Pinkie as a character, and so when this happens, it makes me think like, man, she really is in a bad mental state, and I don't think her friends realize it's happening. And as somebody who's been in a bad mental state before, and his friends didn't realize what was happening, that's a dangerous place to be. You don't want to be in that place. Now, happily, I think the actual point of this was to play it up that Pinkie, Pinkie, I don't know how to salvage this to be anything except Pinkie has a serious mental illness that needs treating. Because it would only take one thing to drive her over the edge. Happily, we know, because of the way the series ends, that never happens. But, man, like, if something bad enough happened to fracture her mental state, I think Pinkie Pie would be a serial killer. It's scary. And, at the end, it turns out her friends were just throwing her a surprise party. And that makes it all better. Her hair poofs up again. And when Rainbow is like, she was having like a tea party with inanimate objects, like, Pinky just kind of looks embarrassed. Now, let me try to salvage it a little bit by saying Pinky is a very over-the-top personality. She's somebody who acts silly. It's possible that somebody this over-the-top and goofy and silly could theoretically behave in this over-the-top way as a way of coping or something. But if you saw this in a person in real life and you weren't concerned about them, I don't know what more could happen to make you concerned. Because it's, like I said, there's just something seriously uncomfortable about the whole situation. And, I love the episode for what it is. But that being said, I am not sure it should have been in the first season, which they thought they were just making for kids. This sort of episode coming up later, when an adult fan base was the majority demographic, fine. But not season 1. Wow. I mean, this is the sort of thing that if it was Encourage the Cowardly Dog, I think it would have kind of fit. Finally, gents, we made it. The last episode of season 1. I told you I'd get to it eventually. So, the Grand Galloping Gala. We built up a couple of different episodes just to kind of get us ready for this episode. And we open with Twilight doing like a Cinderella-style carriage to get them to the ball on time. She magically makes an apple grow into a carriage, and she turns some mice into horses, an incredibly questionable piece of magic considering horses and ponies are people in this universe. It's 80 kinds of weird, and the horse mice things are just god-awful to look at. But it's all good. Rarity uses her feminine charm to coerce some stallions into pulling their carriage for them. So, all's well that ends well, and a great message for little girls. If things don't go your way, just, bat your eyelashes and men will fall at your feet to do them for you. And, you know what? Maybe that's not a great message for kids. Now, for the first quarter of the episode or so, the girls are just getting ready, getting their hair done, stuff like that. And reiterating all of the great things that they want to do at the gala, the reasons why all of them wanted to go to begin with, and all of their motivations, wonderfully, stay exactly the same as when they were desiring the tickets so desperately that they were willing to beg, borrow, and steal. They all still have these very strong motivations for why they want to be there. Daniel Ingram is a huge fan of Stephen Sondheim. I pointed that out before. You could tell because he paid a great homage to one of Sondheim's lesser-known, but fantastic songs from Sunday in the Park with George, putting it together. He did this when Rarity was building up the dresses, and I said back in that episode, at any time we have a song relating to the gala, it's a Sondheim homage, and this one is no different. Into the Gala is an homage of Into the Woods. And like before, I'll play you a little bit of it so you get a sense of it.
At the gala, in the garden, I'm going to see them all the creatures, I'll befriend them at the gala. And I'll earn a lot of money for the Apple family. The Wonderbolts will see me right here at the gala. Didn't need to sell, to find, to prove, to woo, to talk. Into the gala, into the gala.
I think this song is just perfect musical song. If you put this in a proper musical, this could be like the end of Act 1. It's a fantastic song. It's such a great build-up. It's such a good explanation. The lyrics and the music are such a good explanation of these characters and what their motivation is in very succinct form. You get a sense of what all of them want to do there, what their expectations are, and we keep getting this reiteration that the girls, from the opening of the episode until this point, they are thinking this is going to be the best night ever. And anybody who's ever seen a comedy before knows pretty much from the time they say that sentence, it's going to be a disaster. The song is just so great, and their little fantasies they have surrounding, what they're doing. I just love it, and I love how the party guests are all involved as like a choir singing backup. Now, once they're in, Rarity finds out that her prince is a jerk. Twilight finds out that the princess is so busy meeting and greeting guests that she has no time for her. Fluttershy realizes that all the animals there don't seem to be held sway over by her magic. She can't get them to give her the time of day. Rainbow Dash finds out that the party's so loud and so crowded she can't get the Wonderbolts' attention. And Pinkie Pie finds out that these sort of ponies are not the party hard sort of ponies. These are the uptight suit and tie ponies, and that's not the sort of party she was expecting. In fact, that sums up how they all feel. Now, I gotta give this episode something. It doesn't just go straight into the chaos. Every pony has a moment where they think things are actually going to be what they wanted. They're just kind of like a nice little subversion of expectations. You might think that things are immediately going to start going downhill, but no, they have a moment where things are looking up, only for all of their dreams to be crushed. But all the girls are, they're all such great characters, and they're all, for the most part anyway, so active. They don't just immediately give up. They all determine, no, if I have to force it, if it costs me everything, I'm going to make this night everything I wanted it to be.
No, I've waited all my life for this moment, and I'm not going to
Let it slip by. If it's the last thing I do,
I'm gonna make this the best night ever!
So Fluttershy goes out setting traps, trying to get the animals, like forcibly hold them against their will, which, maybe there's a couple of these ponies that need mental help. Pinkie Pie decides to basically take over the music at the party. Rarity decides to force Prince Blueblood into a situation where he can be more chivalrous. Applejack decides that she's going to take all of her wares and basically build something really fancy, high society that everybody there is going to want to eat. And though it's never exactly explained, I think her idea is if she can just get them to eat something, maybe they will want to come to her for more because they'll see the quality after they've eaten it. Rainbow is putting people in danger, trying to save them to impress the Wonderbolts, but they're not seeing it. Then we come to song number 2 in this episode, The Pony Pokey. I kind of love this song.
You reach your right hoof in, you reach your right hoof out, and you shake it all about. You do the pony pokey, meeting lots of folks with clout. That's what I'm talking about.
This episode is also the first time we get introduced with some focus on one of my favorite background characters, Octavia. I love Octavia. I have a shirt with her on it. I just love her. I think she's such a great little character. She only speaks in one episode, but she's just awesome. Now, probably the most famous of the breakdowns that every pony is going through during this episode is Fluttershy, who, it becomes kind of a thing with her, but this was the first time we really saw it in full bloom, is Fluttershy, when she is pressed to the max, she has some anger issues. Not as bad as Pinkie Pie's bipolar disorder, but some pretty severe anger issues. So Pinkie Pie takes over the music and starts DJing. Applejack comes in with her big fancy cake, and as Pinkie Pie dives into the crowd to try to crowd surf, she knocks the cake up in the air. As the cake falls, Prince Blueblood grabs Rarity and pushes her in front of him to save himself from being splattered with cake. And if you know anything about Rarity, messing up her dresses is a bad move.
You, sir, are the most uncharming prince I have ever met!
Stay back! I just had myself groomed!
In her final effort to impress the Wonderbolts, Rainbow Dash accidentally pushes over all of the columns in the ballroom, basically destroying the entire party. Celestia comes in with Twilight, and they look around and see everything that's going on.
It can't get any worse.
Now, with wild animals running loose in the ruined ballroom and food everywhere, Celestia tells Twilight just about the only wise thing you could do in that situation.
Run.
I love the fact that Fluttershy is literally holding an animal in her mouth at that moment. This, however, has to be probably my favorite joke in the episode, and it doesn't seem to get as much attention because Fluttershy kind of steals the show, but this is a great reaction.
Rarity, your glass slipper. Now your prince is sure to find you. Let's go!
At the end of the night, we see that Spike has gone off by himself. He wanted to spend time with his friends, but they all wanted to do their own thing. So he goes to Donut Joe, maybe one of the most underrated of the background characters. He's there eating donuts by himself, and the rest of the cast shows up. And he hears what happened.
That sounds like the worst night ever.
It was!
It's nice to see that they aren't really disappointed anymore. They've kind of enjoyed the adventure for what it was. In hindsight, they can all find it funny. And we even get Princess Celestia to come in and kind of give us our moral for the day.
But tonight was just awful.
Oh, Twilight, the Grand Galloping Gala is always awful. That is why I was thrilled you were all attending. I was hoping you could liven things up a bit. I'm sure you'll agree that, in the end, it didn't turn out so bad for this group of friends.
Yep, didn't turn out so bad for this group of friends. However, everybody else had their night ruined, Princess Celestia. You know, I think this might be the origin of the idea that Celestia is just an outright troll. Because the tea thing in that episode we talked about just a few days ago, that wasn't really a troll move. That was just kind of a simple little gotcha. This is just outright trolling the entire city of Canterlot. So, by nobody getting what they want...
You mean doing exactly what I wanted to do the whole time?
Yes, Spike, you were right.
Oh, sorry, Spike got what he wanted, but everybody else getting absolutely nothing that they wanted out of this experience, they still found the positivity in it, and found that, you know, having that good story to tell later, and these weird memories to look back on, was kind of worth it. After almost 2 years of covering season 1 of My Little Pony, you know what? I have to say, same thing goes for me. I have actually really enjoyed doing this series, even though I've had to do it around a lot of other things, including the birth of my child. I've had to really fight to get these episodes done around everything else in my life, as well as the other episodes that I've been making for this show. And, yeah, I don't regret it at all. I'm really happy that I ultimately have gotten through season 1. And next week, we start season 2. So thank you everybody for watching. God bless you, and I will see you in the next one.